I call the select board meeting for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 to order. First order of business is agenda additions or changes. Any changes or additions from staff?
I do have one addition. It's to discuss and potentially take action on a contract. Should be an executive session item.
Okay, so we can add that at the bottom of the agenda as HIJKL, 6L, I guess. Any changes from board members?
No.
I would like to pull out the minutes for December 20th. So I guess HIJKLM 6M. Although we'll probably do that in the opposite order, since we do executive session motions last. Any other changes?
Tracy has her hand up. I'm not sure if you can see that.
Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to also pull the minutes from January 3rd.
Okay. I guess those would be 6N, or should, yeah, 6N. I guess separate items, I guess. Any other changes? Okay. So we want to make a motion.
Make the motion, we accept the agenda with the additions.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second? Is that Tracy?
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? Don't see any hands up. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. So I guess I should have maybe, since at the beginning of the meeting, I should have mentioned that Sue Cook is not with us this evening. So the motion passed 4-0. Sue had a death in the family, so she's this morning, as a fact matter. So she won't be joining us. Okay, next thing on the agenda is public to be heard. I know with everyone or majority of us, I think being online here, it's maybe a little in a new meeting format or new app. We'll see if we can get through this, but the public to be heard is a time of the agenda for anyone who'd like to speak to the board about items that are not on the agenda. You may address the board with those. If you'd like to speak during public to be heard, please be brief. I didn't bring my notes with me. Please be kind. Address your remarks to me. Please do not, as is the chair of the select board, please do not use inappropriate language. And please do not attack members of the staff or other members of the public. Again, please, if you would like to speak, I guess put your hand up in the app. Or if you're in the room, physically raise your hand. Greg, is there anyone in the room?
We have 3 people in the room. Is anybody going to want to speak?
Okay.
To be heard? I'm getting head no's. No one wants to speak here.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. Anyone like to speak during public to be heard? Now's the time to raise your hand.
Andy, how do we raise our hand? I can't find it.
Under reactions.
Do you have reactions with a smiley face and a plus?
Oh, I see. Raise your hand. Thank you.
Yep. Did you want to speak?
After the person that raised her hand first, sure. It's Mary.
Mary Post. Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I think Kathy Flynn was ahead of me.
Oh, no, I'm not raising my hand. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've been, okay. Am I doing this right? I hope so. I've been gone for a while, and when I came back, I was really, really surprised, Andy, at something that you said at a meeting that I missed. And that was where you said that you thought it might be seen as malicious if the town outside the village citizens were allowed to vote on the separation. I want you to know that I am totally, absolutely more than 100% for the separation, but I still think that it's only right, not just fair, but it's right for the rest of the town that's being affected by the junctions deciding they want to leave us to not have a vote on it. Their leaving us is affecting the rest of us. And I think that we should have a chance to vote. And I just was wanting to find out from you, Andy, what you meant by malicious. How is that malicious of the rest of us to want to vote?
So in the past, one of the and I know some people will say no back and forth, but I'm gonna respond to this. I'm gonna choose to. That in the past, when there have been votes for separation, one of the ways that the and maybe I'm putting intent where it shouldn't be, but one of the things that followed that was the town voting, having its own vote that went a different way, and so we didn't want to appear, the select board, and maybe I have to think back to say whether we had this explicit discussion. We certainly didn't have a vote to take this position, that if we were to warn a vote, it could be interpreted as an intent to try to thwart the separation, and it's been our position all along that we don't want to stand in the way of it. No, but I do understand, Mary, your comments about voting. The legislature, we don't know what they're going to do. They may come back and require it. We don't know.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Someday I hope we can have a back and forth. That would be a really wonderful way to be able to have townspeople be involved in what's happening in their town. And we don't have that now, but that's for another meeting. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Anyone else like to speak during public to be heard? Annie Cooper?
Hi, Andy. Thanks. I just want to, as I frequently do, remind us all that the village is an entity, the town is an entity, but the town outside the village is not a separate municipal entity in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Annie. Anyone else want to speak during public to be heard? Okay, I don't see any new hands up, so we will move on to the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2023 capital budget and 5-year plan. So I will open that hearing. Do we have?
I would like to make the motion, Andy, to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. We are into the public hearing. Greg, do we have someone to?
Dennis is here. If I could just, before jumping into Dennis, turning it over to Dennis, could we ask, if you're not speaking, could you please keep your camera off and your microphone on mute until you're called on to speak? Thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dennis for the capital plan. Oh, you're muted, Dennis.
Sorry about that. I always forget that. Anyway,
I will try to explain the capital plan, but I'll try to be short. I know we have a long meeting. It is an important document. It's been before the board twice before. Once as a presentation, I think it was 4 weeks ago. And then once to basically get into detailed questions from the board. The capital plan is on the webpage in its complete form. It identifies not just how we're going to spend the 2 cents that are on the capital tax every year, but also what the rest of the funding is going to come from. Very briefly, the 2 cents amounts to approximately 500 and bear with me, I've got a bunch of table full of notes here. $535,000 in expenditures, but that's only a portion of the total estimated spend for the capital plan. The capital plan shows an expenditure of $2,840,296. And obviously there's other funds besides the 2 cents on the tax rate. Those other funds, a lot of them are transfers from the operating account. We fund most of our vehicles annually with an amount from the operating account goes into the capital account. And this is across the board for police, fire, public works, admin. And then we purchase the vehicles out of the capital account. That allows us to put a smaller amount, if you will, in each year, let that account grow, and then we buy the trucks or the other vehicles when they come due out of the capital plan. So there's a transfer of funds that way. In addition, there's grant monies included in that. This year, there is a significant grant. We've actually got 2 grants, and I believe we're trying to go after a third for a large stormwater project. It's the last of the projects that we have that will allow us to complete our flow restoration requirements under our state stormwater permit. Not to bore everybody, but just so you remember, there were 4 projects which would allow us to complete our requirements under that permit. 2 in the village, 2 in the town, 3 have been completed. This is the largest of the projects, and it's now ready to go to construction in the summer, late summer of 2022, and completed next year. So that is a large part of the capital plan, and a large part of the total dollars are the grants that we've obtained to do that. In addition to the 2 cents, we're also using some funds within the capital fund itself that are undesignated. And there are 4 items that fit into that category. And I just want to briefly mention them. One is the Fort Water Tower. The roof of the Fort Water Tower needs to be preserved so that we don't lose that water tower. We discussed this at length at the last meeting. So there's funds for that. The front brickwork in the library has deteriorated to the point where it needs to be repaired. Again, this is more than just maintenance costs. This is some significant dollars there. We put a few dollars into the Public Works Equipment Replacement Fund with the cost of vehicles. We haven't changed our scheduled replacement, but the costs have gone up that we need to make this fund solvent. So there are some funds there. And then one of the largest dollar expenditures would be to replace the radio infrastructure for the police and emergency services that's up on Brigham Hill. That communications equipment is outdated. It needs very much would be good to have a generator up there instead of operating off of battery power all the time, and for emergencies, and to ensure that we have that communication system working for the town. So those are 4 kind of extra projects that we've tried to fit into this year's capital plan. In a very broad sense, most of our expenditures now and going forward are really in 2 areas, and that is in stormwater and in buildings. And stormwater, like I say, we will complete the flow restoration piece of the permit. The second piece is the requirement to remove phosphorus. That's a much more lengthy permit requirement. Was 20 years. I think it's now down to 17, where we have a whole list of things that we're required to meet, including reducing the level of phosphorus that we discharge from our entire stormwater system. That plan is underway and it's being worked on, but that will require significant funding expenditure in the future. Hopefully most from grants, but no guarantee on grants. If we don't get grants, it's going to have to be paid for out of the local funds. The other one is buildings. We have a number of buildings that need work or that in fact need to be replaced. And there's 3 or 4 of those that are very significant projects. We have not funded those this year. We can't. It's too large a bill. But we did identify them in the capital plan, which we have not done in the past. So at least we have an identification of the need. We've done some work on what needs to be done through one of the local architects, but there's more work as we further define how we're going to handle each one of those future needs. That's probably a 3 to 5 year time frame, but we don't know at this particular point. The buildings aren't falling down, but the major ones are some additions to the highway garage. Public Works needs to be consolidated. Our offices are in a number of locations. We don't have significant space. We can't expand at the current location. We're looking to basically reconvert the old highway garage into a Public Works building in the future. But that would require that we find a home for our water and sewer people. We need to replace a town salt shed, which is very much in disrepair and falling apart. We are looking at new Parks and Rec facility, and to include some offices, indoor activity space, and a replacement for the pool. Again, these are all longer term projects. And then the other one that we're looking at is a potential for a new fire station. If the fire station were to relocate and build a new fire station at some future date, Public Works would take over that building, and that would alleviate some of the need for additional public workspace for equipment and maintenance. So those are kind of all future projects, but they are identified in the plan as out year needs, and the town will obviously have to tackle those as we go forward. There is one correction that we wanted to make sure we got out, and I can either do it or Courtney can do it. But when we came out with the original warning for the capital budget, we found that there was funds in the fire equipment line, which were essentially double counted in 2 places, and it should not have been. So when we corrected that, the capital tax additions is still, as I indicated, 535,000. The total spending of 2,840,296 remain unchanged, but the ending balance is now $2,923,420 as far as the end of year balance, as opposed to the original number that was presented in the warning. And I wanted the board's aware of that, but I want to correct that for the public just so they knew. With that, I will keep quiet and answer any questions that people may have on the capital plan.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Any board member comments or questions before we go to the public? No. Okay, so let's see. Any questions from the public? Questions or comments? So Annie Cooper, is your hand up new, or is that an old hand?
I'm very sorry. I forgot to take it down before.
Okay. Gabrielle Smith. Gabrielle, you're muted. Your hand's up.
Thanks. I thought I hit the button, but I didn't. Thanks, Andy. So my question is, maybe it's not a question. I'm wondering if either you or Dennis could explain about the capital plan expenditures that I think, if I understand this correctly, are traditionally, they're taxed from the entire town, the 2 cent on the dollar tax. We all pay it, is that right? And then
yes.
And then the projects are generally almost exclusively funded for properties or equipment or buildings that are outside of the village. Am I inaccurate in that? I know it's not 100%, but is that?
Yeah, it's not right. It's not 100%. Stormwater is one significant area where funds have been spent in the village. And I don't know, Dennis, are there any other?
Yeah, I
areas that stand out?
I kind of don't want to be coy about this, but I kind of assumed that this question would come up at some point. So I did do up a little bit. I did some research and some information, and bear with me. This is going to take not a long time, but a couple minutes. Under buildings, I'm going to do it by category. There's 5 or 6 categories. So let me go through them real quick. Under buildings, there's $62,000 allocated from the 2 cents. $50,000 of that is programmed for the police building. That's HVAC improvements, and there's reasons for that that go back to the original construction, the window construction, the nature of the building that we found we now have to change. There is money also for $2,000 for Memorial Hall, which is a shared facility. Both the town and the village use that for recreation programs, more the town and the village, but there. So out of that, my estimate said there's about 52,000, and these are my estimates. So people can obviously take issue with me, but I've gone through and looked at this. The roads are $160,000, and most of that's going to go into, it's reached the point where we need to redo Susan Wilson Road. And, you know, so the question might be, well, why is that a village issue? Well, it is a village and town issue from this perspective. Susan Wilson Road, before the Cirque Highway was built, had about 10,000 cars a day. Now it approaches 25 to 30,000 cars a day. And the whole purpose of the Cirque Highway was to alleviate traffic in the village of Essex Junction, basically at 5 corners. And it's done that. It's taken that traffic away from the 5 corners. So what has that done with respect to the village? Well, with respect to the village, it's essentially provided the capacity in the village to essentially bring some of that traffic back to the 5 corners. And you see that traffic and that based upon the buildings that have been constructed around the 5 corners. In my view, the additional, if that extra 15,000 to 20,000 cars a day that went over to Susie Wilson Road, which required the town to widen it, add traffic signals, and do a whole lot of effort out there, a very significant cost, the village would not have been able, in my view, to be able to have the growth that it's occurring down in that area around the 5 corners. I think it's a legitimate argument that at least a portion of that improvements to Susie Wilson Road really tie both communities together and are not just singly for the town. Vehicles and equipment, $30,000 of this is for, a portion of this is for the police equipment on Brigham Hill Road. Obviously, the police serve both the town and the village. And so that's a shared expense. Paths and walks, we're designing part of that money. We're going after another grant, and that grant would be to construct the sidewalk that was jointly planned by the village and town between approximately Athens Drive and the Cirque Highway in the town. A pedestrian pathway up Route 15 has long been needed. It will serve both communities. It's not a lot of money because most of that money would be a match for a much larger grant. And right now we're probably going to split that project into 2 phases because the project alone is over $1 million. And what we would need is perhaps do half or 3/4 of that project and then follow another year with that. Stormwater, both communities agreed a long time ago, both boards, that we would jointly fund out of the town's capital plan, stormwater projects in the town and village. As I said before, there's a lot of grants we've gotten. We've shared those costs equitably. We've not distributed with any projects the village has come forward with. And we've taken this last project was agreed to as part of the flow restoration plan, which both boards agreed to. It is more expensive than the other 3, but it is a project that both communities signed off of as part of that plan to the state and to EPA. Information management, again, the village may at some point go down their own road for information management, but right now the IT has and continues to serve the village through this next year, our IT section. There are costs there for servers and other hard equipment. That also is, in my view, at least partially shared by the town and village. There's a natural resource management where there's $2,000 allocated from the 2 cents. And my understanding is these funds are directed to ash tree situation in both communities. It's not just the town, but it's both the town and the village. So when you start to look at that, there's approximately, in my view, 75 to 80% of that total $535,000 is shared in some way between the town and the village. And there's probably out of that about 100,000 that you might say is directly related only to town with no relation to what's going on in the village. People can disagree with me, but that's, having looked at the projects, I feel that that's a fair estimate of how that is split between the communities, at least for this year. And every year it's different, but for this year, that's what it is.
So,
Thanks, Dennis.
Dennis, oh, may I ask?
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So it sound, if I understand you correctly, Dennis, are you saying that of this year's capital budget, $100,000 you would say is being spent in the town outside the village, and the other is being spent for project kind of prioritized across both communities, or, well, I should say not both communities, but across the entire town?
Yeah, those projects, and I guess the best way to paraphrase it is it serves both communities. And it's not a pull something out of the trees type of issue. These projects directly serve both communities. Things like police infrastructure and communication. We're going to be, if we go into the separation mode, there is an agreement to share services with the police department. That's a shared cost, no matter how you cut it. So you start to go through all those projects and you take a look at, well, what benefit does the town or the village get from it? And I didn't, you can argue, well, maybe they don't get full benefit. I would argue if they're a shared project and they serve both communities, right now they serve both communities.
Yeah, I don't mean to make the case, Dennis, that I'm part of the town too. So right now, wherever funds are spent benefit me because they benefit my community. So I think my question, and you may have answered it, is that I may have misunderstood. I was under the understanding that the village has a capital tax to pay for projects inside the village, which is also part of the town. And the town taxes on 2 cents on the dollar for projects that are primarily happening outside the town. And that those two lists are not, Dennis, you don't combine, you don't look at the town as a whole and say, regardless of, where the project is in the town, we should prioritize them by the entire town, including the village, and tax everybody. But the village pays for it on its own. And then the town, but this is what I'm trying to understand.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I
Oh,
agree.
thank you. Thank you.
I
So I'm
agree
trying
with
to
you. And
understand.
It is true. We have not merged those systems. The actual administration and how they're set up are really quite different. And to be honest, if we had headed down the path of merger, that was going to be probably one of the most difficult tasks that we would have to undertake, would be to figure out how we would merge those projects, how we would merge those costs, and quite honestly, how you do figure out how do you fairly and equitably share those costs for what the needs are. We never got that far. So what we're doing is, we have not sat down with the village and say, oh, look at the town projects, nor have they sat down and said, oh, look at our projects. What we've tried to do where we can over time is to identify the needs for the town. And I use the town in the global sense. And I think all I was trying to indicate this year was the fact that the projects that we have benefit greatly both communities. In the future, obviously that will have to be separated out. My biggest concern is we will have, when the taxes get separated out, when that occurs, we'll have less money going to the capital fund, and we're going to have increasingly larger needs, especially in the area of stormwater. And that's something the town outside the village, as well as the village, is going to have to figure out how we afford these major projects going forward. And it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah. And so, Dennis, I think you may have corrected me then. So my understanding before I started talking with you is that the capital budget for the town and the village, in the sense that the capital fund for the town is for projects that happen primarily in the town outside the village. When you say the town, you're meaning, when you say the town projects versus the village projects, you're not referring to the town as a whole. You're referring to the town outside the village when you say that.
Yeah, it's, and again, I don't want to confuse things, but it is convoluted because the police serve both. So funds that go
Well,
into the
yes,
capital
I would say
fund in
police
the town
aside.
serve the village. Stormwater the same way. We've equally shared those costs. The cost for all the projects that were built in the village under their requirements for stormwater did not come out of the village capital plan. They came out of the town capital plan by agreement. We had a memorandum of understanding. So
Yeah,
it's,
that's
I wish it was clear and real concise that says, here's the boundary, but it hasn't always been, it hasn't been that way. And that's why, I think we've tried to cooperate as neighbors and do what we can, but it isn't as clear as probably people would like it.
Okay.
You're absolutely right on that.
No, you've been
Yeah.
helpful, Dennis. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And perhaps another piece there is starting with the current fiscal year, village rolling stock capital is also paid for through a town tax. That will be true this year and next year, assuming that budgets get approved
Right.
this coming budget season. So there
So
are
that means-
some
Yeah.
things.
And so
that-
we're all
yeah.
paying that. In other words, and just to be
Yes.
clear, whenever we say this going to the town tax, it means that's a tax that we all pay.
Yes, there is no longer a town outside the village only tax that went away as part of the negotiation of moving the village rolling stock into the town budget.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dennis, and thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sharon. Sharon, your hand is up. You're muted. It says Sharon Irene. Okay, maybe we'll circle back. Annie Cooper, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Andy. Please forgive I hit the applause thing a moment ago instead of my hand up. That was not intended. Two things, Dennis, sorry, to Andy. I should speak to Andy. I'm not certain that the way that the town, I'm trying to find a way to say this politely. So Dennis, I appreciate the time you took. I appreciate the time that Dennis has taken to put into the conversation that he just had with Gabrielle Smith. My understanding is that the fairness aspect of how many projects we pay for as a town that occur in the town outside the village area, it has been severely lopsided, and I think we all know that. I don't think that's a surprise.
Andrew Brown, could you mute yourself, please? Sorry.
I think, thanks, Andy. I think that we all know. Oh, Sharon is locked out of unmuting. I'm happy to wait and let Sharon speak. Maybe she'll say something that will. She's pretty smart. Can you guys unmute her?
I don't see her in the meeting anymore.
I see her. My screen has Sharon right next to you, and Sharon, I don't know.
Oh, right there. Yep.
No.
Okay. I don't have the ability to unmute her now.
All right, I'll keep going for a second, but if you get it, I'm happy to be quiet. So anyway, it's historically been that our total town taxes have gone very significantly toward those projects that are in the town outside the village, and we've all been okay with that because, like what Gabrielle just said, we've all been always, rooting for Team Town all the way. Obviously, the rooting for Team Town has, needed to part ways. And I'd say that I'm cautious about how I will vote on the budget. And I think there should be a bigger conversation.
So Annie, are you talking about the capital plan here?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Am I being confused?
Well, I guess it seemed like you're going off in a different direction and not talking about the capital plan anymore, but I'll let you continue. Go
Well,
ahead.
you might be right. My point is obviously probably clear, and I think maybe I'm fudging it a lot because I didn't expect to be talking about this. I think I might have combined two things at once, and I'm a little embarrassed, but thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks, Annie. So I still see Sharon Zukowski's hand up.
Andy, can we,
Seems to be in mute lockdown. Huh?
Could Sharon maybe sign off and then try to come back in again? See if that works.
So in the meantime, let's go to Patty Davis.
Yeah, hi,
Annie-
Andy. Do
Go
do you
ahead.
want me to start or? do
Yeah, go
Andy,
ahead. I was just going to remind Annie Cooper that her hand is still up.
Okay. I just have a question, so I understand, because Dennis has always been so clear when I pick his brain, and I really appreciate that. Dennis, I want to understand that, I remember one time during a select board meeting way back when Elaine Haney was on the board, and you were trying to explain to her when she wanted more projects done in the village. Why aren't more projects done in the village? And I listened carefully, took notes, and I just want to clarify my understanding. Do the capital projects in the village that they voted on themselves, you know how they vote for their own thing and then they vote town-wide, they vote twice. Does the fact that, you know, our 2-cent capital tax and everything, does the amount that one gets for a match, like a grant, affect where the projects were done during that time when you had the discussion with Elaine at the select board meeting, when she asked why aren't more projects done in the village? I just want to understand if it has to do with whether one gets a grant, either the person in the village that's responsible for the capital plan projects and you being responsible for the whole town projects. That's the voting twice thing. What is it that I'm not understanding?
Patty, do you have a question about, Patty, do you have a question about the current capital plan? Are you?
Well, yeah,
um,
I just wanted, I want to be clear. I just want to understand if it has anything to do with whether one gets a match or not, either from the village or the town. And that's the town capital plan. If you get a certain amount for a grant or a match, does that affect where the projects are done?
Andy, I can
Thanks.
answer that.
Go ahead,
Thanks.
Dennis.
The answer really is no. Qualified no, but a no. Here goes. In stormwater, for example, we have basically said we're going to fund all of the flow restoration projects. This was back 3-4 years ago. Whatever their cost out of the town's capital fund, both town and village. That was part of the MOU that was signed between the select board and the trustees. We have not changed that. The only difference is that in some cases, some of the projects moved quicker and got their grants sooner. So we were able to fund them sooner, but that was not, all those projects have always been in the capital plan once we identified what those projects were. And the timing was to a degree based upon grants, but not that the funds wouldn't flow. It's just that when the grant became available and the project was ready to go, we said, go build it. And we didn't care if it was in the village or the town. It so happened that one of the projects in the village went first. One in the town and one in the village went in the same year. And now the last one is coming in the town about 2 years after the others. So it's been a function of timing, but not a function of policy, procedure, administration, or politics. It's just been, let's build it as soon as we can fund it.
Thank you. You really clarified it. Thanks a lot.
Andy, you're muted.
You're unmuted, Andy.
I'm on mute.
We can hear you.
I was waiting for, I was hoping to hear if Sharon Zukowski was able to unmute herself. Looks like she did.
I am unmuted. That was
All
weird.
right. All right.
This is a question for Dennis, I think. Is he still here? Because I missed a lot of this trying to
Yep,
sign
he's still
in.
there.
So I had a question about the stormwater expense, which seems rather large. Has this been around for a while, or does the expense, is it related to all the new building that we've had in like the past couple of decades? I know that the state requirement for stormwater has been around, I think, for a couple of decades. So I'm just wondering if this is a consequence of all the building we've done, or just something old that we're fixing for stormwater.
Andy, I'll answer that.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
It's not, obviously new buildings have an impact on everything, but that's really not the basis for this. The basis for this is a permit process that the state has adopted. We've gone through 3 or 4 permit cycles of the, and I hate to use the jargon, but it's a NPDES phase 2 stormwater permit for each community has them. You know, Chittenden County has had this permit since about the year 2000, maybe 2001, but they've amended the permit as it's gone through the process. And the largest amendment, the most impactful event change was about, you're taxing my memory here, 5 or 6 years ago, when the state said, you all have to look at your streams and reduce the flow going into the streams, because that high flow has an impact on the biota, which in fact has a downstream impact on the lake. And so we looked at both Sunderland Brook and Indian Brook, and Sunderland Brook was fine. It met the criteria. Indian Brook was not. Hence, we did some studies between the town and the village, 4 projects built those. So we've completed that part of the flow restoration plan. About the time we sent our reports in and said, great, we're done with that piece, the next piece of legislation or permit process that got passed was removal of phosphorus in the lake. And this is based on total pounds of phosphorus that have to remove from the town and the village. It's not keyed to development because we're requiring new developers to put in systems that will help reduce the phosphorus impact. In fact, with every development approval, that's one of the questions we ask is how much suspended solids, how much phosphorus is your particular treatment process going to take out? We're gonna do more along those lines to basically better control future development. Not that we haven't already, but it's going to become more important as we go forward to do that. But the basic premise is based on the size of the community and what that community as a whole has, and they've done all kinds of computer modeling, has as an impact on the phosphorus load in the lake. And so it's not based on our development or the increase in development. It's based on essentially what we have when the law was passed, because that's what the modeling was based on. And they took into account the impact of future development, but that's minimal compared to the baseline that we have to meet just because we're here and have been here.
So probably maybe less development or more thoughtful development would help that. And one other question, so Alderbrook wasn't tested?
Alderbrook was not an issue. The Winooski River is a separate watershed issue, but Alderbrook was not impaired from the studies that were done. The 2 streams that appeared to be impaired were Sunderland Brook and Indian Brook. And there's books on that in the office in terms of the studies that were done. The easiest explanation is they compared all the streams that affected the lake with pristine streams up in the Northeast Kingdom. And they wanted to get those streams that had similar geohydrological characteristics. They compared them and they said, okay, based upon Indian Brook, this stream resembles stream X up in the Northeast Kingdom. Therefore, you've got to remove this much amount of flow or reduce the flow to this level. And that will help those streams better allow the biota to grow and not get washed out every time you get a heavy storm. I'm not a modeling expert. I'm not sure that I agree 100% with the way they did the modeling, but the bottom line is when you do the modeling and then you put in place the systems that we've designed or put in place, at least on paper, we meet the criteria. Down the road, they're going to do more modeling. They may find we've got to do a few more projects, but a lot of those projects that remove phosphorus will also impact the flow, so that by going after phosphorus now, we'll probably be able to reduce some of the flow regime that affects the streams that ultimately get into the lake. Confusing, but that's the best way I can explain it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Dennis. Any other comments? Greg, are there any hands up in the room?
Nope.
Okay. Don. Don, you're muted.
I'm just waiting to make the motion to close the hearing if there's no more
Okay.
questions.
Yeah, I got no more. I don't see any other hands up, and I don't see anybody participating by phone. So go ahead.
Make the motion, we close the public hearing on the
Thank you,
capital.
Don. Thank you, Don. Do we have a, sorry, did I cut you off? You want to say more?
Nope, you're fine.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public hearing is closed. Let's move on to the first business item, which is consider adoption of the fiscal year 2023 capital budget and 5-year plan. Any select board comments?
I'd like to make the motion that we approve the 2023 capital budget, fiscal year 2023 capital budget and 5-year plan.
Thank you,
Second.
Don. Do I have a second? Oh, was that
Second.
Tracy? Okay, thank you. Question I have, do we adopt or do we approve? Greg, I think it's adopt, right? Is it adopt?
We had
That's adoption in the minutes.
adopt on the. I think either one will suffice.
Okay, all right. So you don't need to change. You said either one works, so no need to change the motion. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Dennis. Okay, moving on to business item 6B, interview and potential appointment to Economic Development Commission, Ken Signorello. Ken, are you on or in the room?
Ken is in the room and walking up to the mic.
Great.
Where do you want me? Here, probably, right? Yep. Okay, good. Audio?
Okay, so Ken, introduce yourself and let us know why you.
Audio sounds okay? Hi.
Yep, can hear you. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ken Signorello, and you have my application for one of the open seats on the Economic Development Commission. Would you like me to go through my background or answer questions first?
I think introduce yourself and then we'll ask questions.
So you know me somewhat from my application for the Conservation and Trails Committee, and I'll take it from there. So I've actually owned the business and operated it since 1981. When I think about it, 40 years is a long time. But when I moved to Essex, I brought that business with me. I've been operating it since, that's 16 years ago. And since then, I've done additional businesses here in town. Many of you probably know the Darkroom Gallery down at the Five Corners. That's actually my business. I leveraged my photography hobby into an exhibit system and did that for 10 years. In addition to that, I've had other businesses. I published a weekly newspaper in Burlington called Harbor Watch. You may not know that. And did that for 6 years. And I've been operating businesses pretty much since I came to Vermont in 1979. And so I have lots of experience in doing that. And I do believe that we have some great opportunities here in Essex. One of the things that I've noticed is that one of the most significant resources we have here, 2/3 of our town is either forest land, farmland, or grassland. Surprised to find that out. So one of the things I'd like to do on the Economic Development Commission is start to focus a little bit on that. I'd like to find out what kind of operations we have going on there, because they're not your normal businesses. They're mom and pop sugar operations, or vegetable productions, or egg productions. There's lots of things going on. I was just on, on Brigham Hill Lane, and I saw 2 logging operations. So I'd like to really leverage that resource a bit more and see what kind of economic activity we have going on, and make sure, for example, every single landowner that has more than 25 acres, not including their homestead, knows about the current use program. That would get potentially more forest land into active management, which I think would be really great and would boost our economic development here. So my background is basically business oriented. I've been operating these businesses since forever, it seems like. And I do believe I understand what businesses need and what would attract them to our area, as well as I'd like to see some of what we have as a resource be leveraged a bit more. I mean, I see situations like, for example, Citizen Cider. Citizen Cider, you may not know, started out testing their product and developing their craft at Chapin Orchard. Then they set up shop at 40th and Allen. They grew, and I don't know why, but they ended up in Burlington. I'm not sure if we had the opportunity to keep them here. I don't know, but that's the kind of situation I would love to see stay local. In addition to that, we have now some breweries that just popped up. I would love to see those breweries supplied with local raw materials, local hops, local grain, so we can have a all Essex produced product here. Those are the kind of things that I'd like to try to focus a little bit on in the Economic Development Commission.
All right, thanks, Ken. Any questions from board members? Who wants to go first? Don, looks like you're unmuted.
I'm here. I have just a couple questions. The first one, and I'm just going to clear the room and I'm going to ask it, and I'll probably upset some people. Ken, do you feel there's a problem because you are part of the Essex Retorter and you want to serve on the Economic Development Committee?
Well, if I'm on the Economic Development Committee, I'm going to have a lot less time to do any reporting for the Essex Retorter. Just keep in mind that the Essex Retorter is not my business. I just have reported on it from time to time. Reported for it from time to time. So the chances are, if I'm on any committee or commission, I'll be doing less of that.
Thank you. My second question is, where do you see we can grow more business in the Essex experience area?
That has been talked about a bit. I've been to a number of Economic Development Commission meetings, and they think they're focusing on that to some extent. There's a lot of conversations going on with Mr. Edelman. It's not something that I'm particularly wanting to focus on. I think that they're handling it. I'm really more interested in developing our agricultural businesses. For example, I was just reading about a new thing, agrivoltaics. So when a property puts in a solar farm, if you raise it to 8 feet and spread the panels out a bit more, you can actually raise crops and harvest under those panels. It's happening in Colorado, of all places. Certain crops actually do better in those circumstances. And the evaporation from the plants underneath actually cool the panels, and actually they perform better.
Thank you.
Okay, Pat or Tracy, or yeah, Pat or Tracy, any questions?
I was just wondering what Ken feels the top 3 priorities of the EDC should be.
Well, I've already told you one, obviously, developing the resources that we have a bit more. I'd like to see a little more consistency in the meeting schedule itself. There's been sort of a break, and I'd like to see that the commission actually get together more regularly and focus on the work that they have. And finally, the commission has been working on a database of all the businesses in Essex, which I think is a good idea, but it doesn't seem to be getting too far. I think that's probably is a priority and should be worked on a little bit more aggressively. That 3, I think.
Great, thank you.
All right. Ken, your name's currently up for 2 committees, this one and the Conservation and Trails. I guess one question is, do you have capacity to do both? Desire to do both?
I do have the capacity to do both, if you so wish it.
Okay. Let's see. Other question I want to ask is more to staff. There are 2 seats open, right?
Correct. Yes.
And I have heard that there are other candidates who have come forward recently. Is that true?
I've heard there are some people interested. I don't know if we've actually received applications yet, but I have also heard that there are some others interested. And we do have, the Economic Development Commission is looking into, and I think they may have voted amongst themselves to make a recommendation that they open the commission up to have up to 2 seats for non-resident business owners to bring in some additional perspective and help make sure those seats are filled. And that should be coming to you probably within a month, if not sooner.
Okay, so we don't have any active applications at this point.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, so Ken, I think it's likely that the board is going to want to go into executive session to have a discussion about this appointment. So we will, if we make it that far tonight, hopefully we'll go into executive session and have our discussion, and then town staff will contact you tomorrow if we make a decision.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Ken. Okay, moving on to next business item. Consider 30-day extension of Town of Essex rule requiring wearing face coverings indoors and public spaces. Greg, is there anything we need to go through on that?
I'll just give a quick overview. This is a law that's allowed, it's Act 1 that was passed by the state, allowing municipalities to implement their own mask requirements. The town of Essex implemented its current rule on December 7th. It's still in effect through the state law. It has to be reviewed within 45 days to consider being extended. It can be extended every 30 days through April 30th of this current year, of April 2022. So with that in mind, the first 45 days is coming up on January 21st. So this is an opportunity for the select board to take a look at the mask rule and decide if you want to extend it with or without modification. What's in your packet had a few, I think, minor modifications, just clarifying some of the dates that are in there and saying when it would be extended to, and mentioning that April 30th date, just to put that out there. At this point, there's no enforcement component to the Essex rule. On speaking to the police chief, he agrees that to keep it that way is probably the best way of doing things. I'd support him in that. Just taking the time to have to respond to complaints, track down enforcement fines, pursue those would be quite time consuming. We were afraid. The chief said there's only been 13 complaints since the rule has been in place. Only one of those was for an individual, and it was a business owner asking how to respond to a customer not wearing a mask. The rest of the complaints have been mostly about businesses that didn't know it was in effect. The police have spoken to those businesses, and once they understand that there is a rule in place, there's been no issue. Happy to try to answer questions about that if there are any, but that's the rundown.
Right. Thanks, Greg. Any board member comments? Don, I see your hand.
There's no legal way to extend it more than 30 days.
No.
We have to continue it for every, okay, thanks.
Yeah, we have to do, and in fact, the 30-day extension expires before, we have to pick this up at our very next meeting also. So yes, our February 7th meeting will be reviewing this again to extend it potentially
That's
for
what
another
I
30
was
days.
hoping we could find more days to extend this. We
Yep,
did
yep.
not. Okay, thanks.
No. Yep. Any other board member questions or comments? Okay, there have been a significant number of emails that have come across in the last couple of days. I've tried to respond to all of them that although I did have to cut things off about 6:20. So not a single one was against the extending the mask rule. I'm mentioning this because probably a third of the emails I got today were addressed solely to me. Most of them were addressed to the board, but there were a fair number of them that were addressed only to me. So let's see, without any additional board member comments, I think we'll go to the public. One thing I do want to say is if we've got a long agenda tonight. So if try not to repeat what someone before you has said. It's fine to say that you agree with prior comments and leave it at that if that's what you are willing to do. But try not to extend this too long into the evening if we can avoid it. So first hand I see up is Marcus Serta.
Thanks, Andy. May I ask one clarifying question about this rule before I give more comment?
Yes, you can. Yes.
So, and I speak as a resident of Essex. I also speak as the president of the board for the Essex Community Players. Under the current mask rules, it requires that a mask be worn in all public places. In the interpretation going through the FAQ, it seems to be defined that the public place is where the public has access. Once past the threshold where an invitation or admittance is required, like a ticket, then it sounds like that rule then no longer applies. Would that be your interpretation of that rule?
So we have shared that possible interpretation with gyms, for example, where they say their front counter is public space, but then their own rules apply inside where there's restricted access to either members or paying customers that are paying for a single day or however they choose to run their business. So once inside, then the rules for the business apply. Same thing happens with, say, a major manufacturer that has RFID access to their buildings. Those areas are not available to the general public, and so their own rules apply. So if the Essex Players, and I understand you have a performance toward the end of February. And please note that, as I said earlier, we will be reviewing this again on February 7th. So depending on where things are with Omicron, I guess we'll see what happens then. But I guess to answer your specific question, I believe you could interpret that someone who has purchased a ticket, you're not going to let the general public to just walk in and sit down for one of your performances.
Correct. So if I may, I'll share my comments then.
A potential difference that I want to clarify, though, is that many of the gyms have policies themselves where they require their members or users to provide proof of vaccination. So you're potentially a different situation.
If I may, I hear you. So if I may, so again, the board of the Essex Community Players last fall, while we weren't in a mask mandate, actually already had a rule that upon entry of Memorial Hall, everyone had to show proof of vaccination. Every member of the cast, crew, and patrons had to show proof of vaccination before coming into the hall. And that's how we continue to proceed. That's the way we're still looking at it. So with that in mind, and again, with the comments you just made, please know that I recently reached out to Ally Vile about this, who acknowledged the fact that while that interpretation may be true, because we are in a municipal building, therefore it's a higher standard, therefore it does not apply. But I do not see that within the rules that a municipal building has some additional restriction. And on top of that, this is not impacting town staff. This is us renting an open building that happens to be owned by the town. That being said, again, my ask of the board tonight is to simply ask for an exemption from the aspect of we still have our masking rule and vaccination rule in place and are planning on keeping that in place. What I'm hoping for is that the board will consider an exemption for performers only on stage. That way they can put on their performance unmasked. Again, we already have rules about vaccinations in place. We have, and we are checking that upon, entry into the hall. The other thing is this rule that this exemption that I'm asking for is similar to one that Burlington put into place and is being done widely at a number of other performance venues. So this is not an unusual exemption to which I'm asking. But again, this is about the fact that, and I understand that there's going to be another check-in on February 7th, but as you can probably imagine, in order to put on performance like this, we have a lot of planning, right now we're in rehearsal, and we have to be prepared for what that performance is going to look like. The performance changes masked to unmasked. It changes depending on the circumstances. Right. So we need that planning time in order to work that performance. So my ask of the board on behalf of the board of the Essex Community Players is that the board consider please exempting performers as a part of this rule. I'm not asking for it broader because I recognize the way the town is going, but at the same time, I'm trying to find the best way that our show can put on the best possible show. Because I believe that right now, the mask will make the show much more difficult.
Marcus, Marcus, thank you. I think you've made your point. The one key factor there is you've reminded me that you're in a municipal building, and that's a separate jurisdiction, I guess. The municipal manager's safety policy requires masks. It's not the select board's rule that determines whether or not masks need to be worn in a municipal building. There's another layer on top of that Yves de Veuve, could you please mute? But Marcus, you're in a municipal building, so we have to have the discussion. We have to, this discussion needs to.
Yeah, just a sec.
Needs
Hi,
to be.
yeah, sorry about that.
Yves, please, could you please mute your?
Can you hear me?
You're interrupting the meeting. Could you please? We're hearing your household. Can you mute someone else is talking now? Yves, could you mute yourself, please?
I've muted him.
Okay.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Yes, I am unmuted.
Could you please mute yourself? Thank you. Okay, sorry, Marcus. Sorry. Did you get my point there that we need to have a discussion with the safety aspects in a municipal building is a different
I understand what you're saying. I again, I think my feeling on it still is a matter of, this is not the city hall. This is not town offices. There's no municipal
Right.
staff in this building. It's a wide open building to which we're managing and renting from the town. So municipal building is.
Yeah, we will.
I
Thanks for
understand,
your
but
input.
Yeah.
We'll take that into consideration when we have our discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. Next person with their hand up, it says Daryl's iPad. Can you please clarify your name?
Yeah, it's Daryl Langworthy. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I tried to log over my computer and it wasn't having it for some reason. So the iPad worked. So I guess I just wanted to voice in this as a business owner here in the village. I'm trying. I get the climate and the virus and everything else. Hence why we got to this point of talking about a mask mandate. But I guess my two issues I had was how quickly it was done, and without really notice to the public that you were going to have a vote on it to hear what the majority of the people might think, or business owners. And then two, the burden it put on us business owners over the last month, or so, 45 days or whatever, with this, to, a couple of days of people not knowing, having to deal with customers. And then the fact that a majority of people were already masking. So what was the intention of it? I guess is one of my questions, to make a mandate when majority of people were already starting to mask up on their own. And I felt like they're doing it more freely. Then we're at this point now where we're telling everybody they have to again. And of course, the biggest thing is rebel. And I want to be clear, I wear a mask. I'm fully vaccinated. My staff wear a mask and everything. And they've been doing it before you made a mandate. But I just try, it's literally affected small businesses. And I've talked to several business members in the town and in the village that we not that we don't understand the mandate, but we feel like there was a better way to approach the situation than necessarily the mandate. And then continuing it, we've all seen losses in business and everything else from it because people have boycotted us. And it started the whole process of that happening. Like 3 days after you guys put it out, you had to put out an actual thing about don't boycott businesses in Essex because of a mandate. Blah, 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 blah. Did we really cause more of a problem than we did a solution? And is that what we're going to continue to do? I guess is my question.
All right, thanks, Daryl. Gabrielle Smith.
Hi, Andy. Thanks. Yeah, I'm very much in support of continuing the mask mandate. I don't know that it's something that really is a matter of what my opinion is. I'm not a doctor or a specialist, but it seems quite clear that masking is in everyone's best interest. And while I appreciate that there are people who are not complying for reasons of their own, and I do understand that the mandate does not come with the ability for the police to enforce it, and I understand why that is. I don't think that it should stop us as a community from defining our norms through the mandate. And in this community, we look after each other, and we are asking that people who live here and who visit here and who shop here and come to our community wear a mask, because that is in everyone's best interest, and we need to norm that behavior as much as we can and reinforce what doctors and health officials have been trying so hard to communicate to people who live in this country and in our community. And I would ask that you consider, and I realize it may not be possible, for possibly the police. I don't know who might do this, but if we could find a way to, I don't know, remind or encourage businesses to post the sign outside their building. I do think that helps people. Some folks are just needing to remember when they walk inside to get that mask on, and having a sign up can be helpful for that. And just making people aware that that is the norm for our community based on the mandate. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gabrielle. Raj Chawla.
Thanks, Andy. Sorry, I was across the room. I wasn't sure where I was in line.
I just was listening to Marcus talk about the waiver for entertainment, and I think it's an interesting idea. I just encourage the board to take some time, especially if you're going to have until next meeting, to look into what that means and the ramifications of that. How other communities, as he mentioned before, deciding on that tonight. It sounds like you have some time before their performances without causing too much pain to the troupe. It could be a significant impact on the community, and also considering the waiver of using a municipal building, rental or not. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just hoping you take the time and don't decide tonight. Do a little research. Thanks. Thanks, Raj. Annie Cooper.
Hi, thanks, Andy. I support the mask mandate. We're almost out of the woods with Omicron. It will be not too much longer now. I think hanging in there is respectful and appropriate. I agree with Raj about the Essex players, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Annie. Brian Sheldon. Brian, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Brian Sheldon. I live in Essex. Thank you, Chair Watts, for this opportunity to speak. I rise today to ask the select board extend our indoor mask mandate for another 30 days. On this day in 2020, Vermont was averaging 142 COVID cases per week. On the day y'all passed the rule here in Essex, Vermont was averaging 261. And today we're averaging just under 2,000, like 1999 when I looked at the New York Times website this morning. Now, I'm not a public health expert, and I'm sure you're going to hear from some tonight, including Raj. What I am is an engineer. And what that means to me is we should continue things that the data shows are working. I'm also someone who understands a little bit about messaging. And I'm sure, as you've all seen, the narrative is going around that folks don't have to follow our mask mandate because it has no penalties. I recommend that you fix that. Let's follow Williston's lead and implement civil penalties. As Mr. Dugan pointed out, there aren't that many. There's only 13 complaints. It shouldn't cost a lot of time for the police department to enforce those. If numbers were going down, I could understand the argument that the penalties weren't necessary, but 2,000 a week is greater than 680 a week. It's time. And last, I wanted to reshare a story that I shared when you implemented this in December. My partner and I wanted to go to Turner Toys to get gifts for Christmas. When we did, this is before the Essex mask mandate, there's a gentleman behind me who wasn't wearing a mask. A Turner Toys staff approached this gentleman and said, "I'm sorry, but we're requesting that all who enter our store wear a mask." Instead of getting angry or leaving, the man apologized, reached into his pocket and put on a mask. So I thanked the staffer and I ended up spending more than $100 there that I never planned to spend. If they hadn't enforced their safety rules, I would have turned around and left. So I have to beg to differ with Daryl, and I'm sorry about the impact it causes on local businesses, but I disagree that it is hurting businesses. It's hurting businesses not to have masks more. Let's continue to make Essex be the safest place to live, to work, to shop, and to learn. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brian. Christine Gaynor Patterson.
Hi, I'm a resident of Essex Junction. I agree with everything that was just said. I want the mask mandate to continue. My own personal example is I went out to a local shop for the first time, like restaurant, to grab a cup of coffee for the first time like last week, because I knew when I went and I would go in there and order, everybody would have a mask on and I could get what I needed and left. So I'm actually spending my dollars more often because I feel more protected while I'm out in the community. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep, thanks, Christine. Yves DeBoeuf.
Yeah, first of all, apologies for my blunder earlier. I agree with everything that has been said in favor of the mask mandate, and I just want to share like a quick story. I have been working with the hospital, especially the the physician and nurses that are working in the OR to help them with air purification and ventilation. And I can tell you what they've told me. The morale is extremely low. Some units are one physician away to not function because there are 4 or 5 physicians down with COVID. And as you know, the hospitalization keep ramping up. So I think what is missing in all of this is really, there is not an understanding how dire the situation is in the healthcare system. We are starting to see that in the educational system, where Essex School District had to close every single school but the high school. And it was because, I would like to thank the Essex District for that. They saved the midterms of the Essex High School. So we are in a dire spot right now. And we don't know when Omicron is going to go away. We don't know if there is a new variant behind. What really people need to understand is that masking is the first line of defense. Science has proved it. I am a COVID researcher. My specialty is in aerosols. And I would implore everybody to actually up their masking game. If we want to get out of this, please find N95, KN95. Even if the fit is not perfect, it's still better than a cloth mask or a poorly worn surgical mask. So totally in favor with mask mandate. I really thank the board for their action. I have personally seen very few people not wearing a mask. And lastly, with respect to Marcus, if the board is okay with that, the board can contact me. There has been actually multiple studies on Symphony, how to make Symphony safe with COVID. And this is not that hard of a task and that expensive of a task. So if you're willing or if you're interested, I'm willing to help on this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Nathan O'Connor.
Yeah, I would just say thank you to everyone for being here tonight, and I would also I endorse the extension of 30 days for our mask mandate, and also I'm a researcher in immunology and neuroscience, and I would really PPE has a long strong history of protection in science and medicine, and that's personal protective equipment, and that starts with masks. They work, they protect people, they prevent transmission. The science behind that is not in question. What I would really ask is, if this is hurting business, I would love to see some evidence of that. So I want to turn it around and ask, where's the evidence that business is actually being hurt by an unenforceable mandate, frankly. So yeah, as a scientist, this is a little bit silly to me. That's it.
All right, thanks, Nathan. Sharon Zukowski.
Hi there. I'll keep it short. My emails to you are very long. I apologize for that. I also, as you know, am in favor of some sort of enforcement capability, because I'm not going to name them, but I know 2 businesses in particular that are telling their staffs not to enforce it and not wearing masks. And as to losing business, I will never go in those businesses again. So I think the people that weren't wearing them before still aren't wearing them, and we who are abiding by the mandate. So I hope you'll consider some sort of enforcement capability, because I know the police are short-staffed, but they could just set a couple examples. Just like speeding, you don't stop everybody from speeding, and stopping people from speeding saves lives too. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sharon. Okay, I don't see any other hands up online. Greg, are there any hands up in the room?
Nope, nothing in the room.
Okay, let's see, I'm gonna scroll down, make sure there's nobody participating by phone. I don't see any phone participants. So I will, so Rachel Lazat had her hand up at one point, but I no longer see her in the meeting. Okay. All right, so I'll bring the discussion back to the board then. Any board member comments? Pat, go ahead.
Okay, I was trying to raise my hand. Yeah, I've talked to a few people, but I think that like most of us on the select board, a lot of our evidence has to be a little bit anecdotal. So watching to see when I go to Hannaford's, how many people were masking before the mandate and how many were masking after. It was a pretty significant jump in numbers, which is really what we're looking for. We're doing this as a preventative measure to help keep our community running. And we know that right now it's in danger of not. You've spoke of it before, but my own daughter's school was canceled last week, because they simply ran out of teachers. There are so many who are sick currently with COVID. We have a pretty significant portion of our populace who does work or do work, who work each day at the hospital. The cutting the transmission where we can is just simply the most responsible thing to do. I am not entirely certain myself as to whether or not adding a civil penalty would really get more compliance or not. I think we may be at a point where I think realistically there's always going to be probably 5 or 6% of people, I'm making the number up, pretty small number, who simply are never going to do what we're requesting, even if there is a civil penalty involved. But I do think that the wearing of masks has increased pretty substantially in our community since the addition of the mask mandate. So I would prefer to continue the mandate as it is right now. And then the question is to performances. I feel that opens a box in some ways. I don't think any of us would feel comfortable if there was a concert that required ticketed entry and 300 people showed up at the fairgrounds, and if they had tickets, it would be a similar situation. I realize that the Essex players are going further as far as checking their cast members and vaccination status, but my preference would be for us not to rule on that until February, when we're a little closer to seeing whether or not we're through this hump with Omicron or not, before making any further decisions.
Thanks, Pat. Tracy or Don?
I just want to echo Pat's comments around just being able to visibly see as we're out and about in Hannaford and going to the hardware store, things of that sort. But Andy, I also wanted to mention at the beginning of this topic, you mentioned that we didn't have any emails in opposition. I had counted 3 emails that were in opposition to the mask mandate. And in that same comment, there were roughly 50 in favor. But I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that we did receive their emails in opposition.
Okay, thanks for that correction, Tracy. Don, any comments?
No, I'm good with what Patrick and Tracy have said.
Okay. One thing, maybe it's unrelated, but I want to bring it up because a number of folks asked about whether the town could provide masks. I know it's potentially a can of worms with regard to how to distribute equitably, and what or the suggestion is to use ARPA funds to do that. Greg, I don't know if there's any town response or whether there needs to be more thought around that.
I think that's basically it, Andy, is we need to give it some more thought for equitable reasons, for just the broader use of ARPA and how to do that. there's a memo in your packets today that we just get some more guidance from the feds around ARPA, and we do want to spend some more time really kind of considering that and how to roll it out.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Greg. Okay, I agree with, anecdotally, going out to the grocery store. There's definitely, I frequent Hannaford's at multiple different days during the week, different times during the day, and right before we put the rule in place, it would be anywhere from 20% to 80% of people wearing masks, and now it's high 90s, and I just assume anybody without a mask has a valid medical reason to not have it, and it's usually handful numbers in the whole store. So I think we've achieved what we set out to do. We wanted it to be an educational opportunity, not a punitive one. So I agree with not adding in the enforcement at this point. So I guess, does anybody want to make a motion? Dawn, go ahead.
I'm ready. I would like to make the motion that we extend our mask mandate by 30 days as originally stated.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Pat. So Greg, do we need to put dates in the,
Yeah, if I can suggest a friendly amendment as presented with the changes in your packet to include dates clarifying when the rule will be in effect.
I'll accept that change.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Pat, you okay with that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of extending the mask rule for 30 days, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, 6D, consider approval of statement in regards to Village of Essex Junction separation from Town of Essex. Greg.
Sure. So in your packet is a memo that you had seen at your last meeting. It incorporates now a few changes that were discussed at that meeting. Sue had presented some recommended changes in the second bullet, and Tracy had pointed at some stuff out in the last bullet, the two sub bullets there, just to speak to clarify what some of the impacts or potential impacts might be. So. The memo that's in your packet includes those changes. You can see them in track changes. That was all that was changed from the last time, and we'll leave it up to the board if you want to make more changes and or approve this as is.
Okay, one of the other things that came up at the last time we discussed this is Andrew Brown was actually chimed in that he and I had intended to get together to have a short discussion about what to do with regard to addressing the legislature. He and I did speak. His intent is to review the merger votes and separation vote history and the proposed charter and timeline, and then discuss the agreements that we've been working on. So I guess my response is that I don't want to go into I don't want to propose a potentially contradictory history. I want to try to stick with, I guess, the content of the document we've been working on here, and potentially provide that to the legislature with a discussion of its main intents. So I just wanted to share that back to the board with what our discussion with Andrew was. Also, the other thing that I will likely would want to bring up is the potential impact to the town of the known impact to the town of the remaining town of a substantial tax rate increase, and the discussion about what we want to do to try to mitigate that with regard to use of fund balance, the shared service agreements that may have continued for at least for a couple of years of financial transaction associated with them. I think, well, police for one will hopefully be a long-term one, and then the assessment is a shorter-term one. And also the intent to take the transition year to work on efficiencies, to see if there are things that we can do in our efficiency for our processes. So I think those are the main points that I mentioned to Andrew that we would like to also address here. So I guess having gone through that, the other point I guess I want to make is tomorrow, 1 o'clock is the first reading for the GovOps for the charter change. At this point, we've not been, and there's no indication that any testimony is expected. So I think this is just a first reading to the GovOps committee. If anyone wants to join in with that, I think there should be links available on the legislature's website to get to that committee, because everything's online now. You can access it and attend in real time to hear what's said. So I think I've gone on long enough. Anybody have any comments on the document here in question? Any comments or questions on what I've said? Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, as far as the comments you made about fund balance and shared services, were you looking to have that incorporated into this statement, or is that just something you were bringing up to be aware of?
I guess I made those comments in anticipation of being asked if the town is okay with the separation and what the impacts of the town might be. I don't know, maybe perhaps other members could comment whether we want to, how much detail we want to get into with regard to potential actions that future boards may take. Right, that's another, I guess, consideration is we all might not be here when it happens. But I don't know. I guess I'm looking for others to comment on that. If you think we should incorporate that. Patrick, I see your hands up.
It is, though. I don't know if I'll be able to provide any clarity for your question about incorporating it into a statement or not. I do just want to reiterate, I have thought about it over the last 2 weeks. My stance on this remains, which is that as it's not select board initiated, and with clarification that I don't think that there's any legal ramifications or issues with it, that I don't think that we should take a position. I know I'm in the minority there, but just to reiterate that I do feel strongly that this is not something that we should be putting out. If they ask us for testimony, I think that we can give that. But as far as a formal position like this, my preference would be to simply not take one.
Okay, Dawn or Tracy, any comments?
I'm fine with it as presented. Andy, I took your comments regarding our options as just that, options. We haven't decided on any of those, but I think it would be fine and logical to present them as such, as options that we may be able to take in the future, or another board, as you point out.
Right.
I agree with
No?
Tracy.
Yeah. How about, I guess, with regard to taking a position, I guess that Pat has brought up. I don't want to ignore that. I've always thought of this document as something that to be shared with the legislature. I don't feel that this is a document of support or non-support. It's more an acknowledgement, and so I don't know.
Andy, at the beginning of this, we made the statement that as a select board, we were not going to stand in the way of the village
Yep.
working in their separation plan. To me, that's statement enough. We're not getting in their way. We're trying to work with them and help them work out the deals of what a separated village and town would, or city and town would look like. I don't think we need to make a further statement.
Okay, maybe Pat, can you clarify when you say position, taking a position, are you saying that, are you objecting to this document and its contents, or are you objecting to us voting to approve it? Go ahead, Pat.
Had to unmute myself. The objection is to taking a position. That is, literally at the top of this memorandum. The issue is whether the select board wants to take a formal position about the separation. Honestly, I think probably 80% of this language is extremely neutral. I have heard, and other citizens have come to me saying that they don't feel it's neutral, that they think that there is language in here that can be used to prevent the village from separating. And honestly, I just feel that if we are indeed not standing in the way of separation, then there's no need to put out a statement that could be chosen to be interpreted by members of the public in one way or another. Simply what, as Dawn mentioned, we said we're not going to get in the way. If some members of the public or some individuals on other boards think that this position, or rather this statement written as is, has a potential to derail it, then I would prefer simply not taking one at all. And as I mentioned, I think that fits within the select board's history. But that's where I came down with it. Again, I appreciate all of the work that's gone into it. It's definitely tough. There were some good discussions around it. And like I said, I think most of this is completely neutral, but on the off chance, I would just prefer not to.
Is there, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have it at your fingertips. I guess what, and maybe you don't want to say it here, or you share it later or something. Which I guess I'm wondering which particular language is, because I know I was in your position not too long ago with regard to stuff that went out about merger. I don't want to completely discount your concern. And perhaps I'm not putting the right eyes on, the right on my own eye, the right position of my own eyes on this as well.
No, I think it's a good, I think we're having good conversations around this. What I have heard, this was not my first interpretation on reading it, but I can see the point. In the second bullet, these most recent votes to merge, the majority of voters in the village voted in favor of the merger proposal, where the majority of voters in the rest of the town voted against the merger as proposed. We don't know that that's the case. One or two members of the public said that they were against the merger as proposed, but they are not against the merger in totality. We're putting some language in here on the public that we don't know if the case or not. There were, so I mean, that was the first one that I heard, and that was brought to my attention as something that people felt could be, us misinterpreting or putting language where it shouldn't be. Do I think government ops is going to have a large concern about it? I don't know. Probably not. But if we have the ability to simply not take a position, then I would prefer to err on the side of caution. We're in very tricky waters where, things we say and do could have ramifications beyond the intent. And that's just where I ended up with it.
Thanks, Pat.
Sure.
So what does the board want to do here? Do we want to continue to take more a closer look at this and try to scrutinize whether we're adding intent where it isn't intended, or
Well, back to my original question, and maybe Andy, you don't know, but maybe Greg, why do we need to issue a statement? Who's asking us to make a statement?
The idea behind this was that there's a decent chance the select board or someone from the select board will get asked to go before the legislature and testify, and to have some talking points and a statement ready that the select board has more or less agreed to, so that you're going in with some preparation and being able to speak more than just off the cuff about how the town and the select board are reacting to separation.
yeah, so right. So assuming that you're going to want the chair to go, I don't want to go in there and fly by the seat of my pants. I really would prefer to have some language I can refer to that the select board agrees to, or that supports. So I think that's the big part of that. Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Andy, you sort of just said what I was going to say is I don't see this as a position. I don't see this as like a press release type of statement. I see this as talking points to prepare for the eventuality that presumably Andy will be asked to the legislature to testify. I would agree with Patrick that maybe that as proposed could just come off, because that does assume, which we don't want to do. The only statement that we can make is that the majority of the voters in the rest of the town voted against the merger. Why? We don't know. So I would offer that as a potential change.
All right. So I guess I'm trying to figure out steps forward here. We can continue to discuss this meeting after meeting, or we can, and I think there's significant validity to the question of maybe going through and making sure that we don't have any other inadvertent wording that causes problems. My only concern is if we run up against the need to testify before we close this.
So Andy, it would make you more comfortable if you had these as talking points if you're called to testify. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Then I'd like to make the motion that we approve this statement about the separation of the Village of Essex Junction from the town of Essex, removing as proposed from bullet number 2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tracy. Any discussion? Pat, I know you brought this up. Would you feel more comfortable if we put more scrutiny behind it with the lens that you are suggesting?
I mean, I think I would need some time to go through the document yet again and kind of pinpoint it. So, I mean, I think regardless, tonight I will be voting nay. But again, it's not a comment on the work or on the
I get it.
language that we have all done here. It's just to be clear. I think everyone has done a great job putting this together. It's a procedural thing for me.
And I'm to be honest, I'm actually a little reluctant to approve it tonight as well, without going through with the the lens of, are we putting any inadvertent intent in any of this? I have not looked at it in that light. So, Greg, if we vote against this, can we bring it up again if we change it again, or does it close the question?
Ooh, you're testing my Robert's rules knowledge. Tracy's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Someone who voted in the opposition of how to vote, well, no. Yeah, because if it fails. So someone would have to make a motion to reconsider, and then that motion would have to be voted on, and then the original question is back on the table.
Okay, so I guess before we go there are some hands that are starting to go up. And I guess generally we don't allow public comment after we have a motion on the floor, but since we neglected to go to the public before we made the motion, is the board okay with going to public comment at this point? I see Tracy nodding. I can't see Pat though. Let's see, how do I?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. All right, so I see a couple of hands up, which I think are residual hands from previously. Brian Sheldon, is your hand up for this topic? Or are you still up from previous?
Nate's not. I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to lower my
right.
hand.
All right, thanks, Nate. Andrew Brown.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much. And my sincere apologies to coming into the meeting with a hot mic that I didn't realize was hot earlier. So my apologies for the background noise that interrupted the meeting. I cannot thank you enough for taking this moment for a pause. And frankly, if the position of the select board really is that the select board does not want to stand in the way of the separation efforts, I highly encourage you to follow that example that Don was mentioning, of have that simply just be the statement. I completely agree that having talking points is very, very important. Nobody wants to go to the legislature blind or feel embarrassed. In many ways, none of us are going to be able to predict all of the questions that are going to be asked. And so really being able to just be prepared as to what has gotten us here and your plans moving forward, as we discussed, are what's going to be most important. In my opinion, in my assumption. In terms of what is currently written, I really think that pause is important, because many of the points there can be taken, I believe, in ways that could be interpreted as standing in the way of separation. For example, the statement of there has not been a townwide vote, which I believe is in the second bullet. This appears to be included because the select board wants to have a townwide vote before the legislature decides on separation. If that is your intent, keep it in. If that is not your intent, please take it out. Similarly, the impacts in the final bullets, nearly every single one of them are negative in tone and give the impression that the select board opposes separation. So again, if the desire is to not stand in the way, then please take those out. I would be happy to go through this in more detail with you, with any of you offline, in terms of having a bit of a conversation as to how this may be perceived by those who have not been in the weeds at any point in time that we can make work. Additionally, I would say that it would be important to let the amicable separation resolution, the progress on our agreements, and that statement of not standing in the way be the limit of any formal vote. if you make a vote that approves of even these as talking points, then again, that can give those same perceived assumptions as to potentially opposing separation. So if, again, the overall position of the select board is to not stand in the way of separation, then make that be the formal vote. Anything else opens up a can of worms that none of us may want. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Sharon Zukowski.
Very short. I have an issue with the expression because I've heard it on the EDC with the expression offline. I think you have to think a little bit about public meeting law when you're talking about offline meetings with the select board. Thanks.
Yeah, we would certainly not meet with a quorum. Right.
Yeah. I knew you
Yep.
knew that, but just like that expression, like what? Offline? No. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Sharon. Annie Cooper.
Yes, thank you very much, Andy. I'd like to just say thank you to Andrew Brown's comments. I agree with them, but also to the select board. Really, I appreciate you're really being so thoughtful and working so hard to be fair-minded, and it's obvious to me, especially tonight. And I really am almost teary-eyed. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much, all of you.
All right, thanks, Annie. Okay, I guess we have a motion on the floor. You take some public comment. Any other board member comments? Oh, I just see Patty Davis's hand. Oh, no, is that a hand up or is that a?
Well, first it's a hand, then it's a thumb, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead, Patty.
sorry, I'm trying to figure out this computer. I just want to say, Andy, that you are really thoughtful and you're so thorough. I love it. You're just like really good when it comes to detail. But my take on the whole thing, rereading it is factual. It's non-emotional. It's just factual. It's basically just stating what happened. And that's all. And there's no emotion involved. That you're definitely a team player and you want to work this out, but you're going to be asked to get up there and say something. And I think by just stating those facts on that paper, it's not a statement as in this is my position. I'm just telling you what happened, period. That's what happened. Those are the facts. No one can deny that. That's all. So all this tiptoeing, walking on eggshells, I think is making you more uncomfortable. I think you just go in there and state the facts and then let them figure it out. That's their job, not yours. You did a great job.
All right, thanks, Patty. Any other public comment? Greg, is there any hands up in the room?
Nope, nobody's looking to speak here.
Okay, all right. Okay, Patty, if you could put your hand down. What's the board's pleasure here, as Max Levy always used to say? I guess we go to a vote. Okay, the motion is to approve a slightly amended version with the as proposed removed from the second bullet. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Okay, motion fails 2-2. I do intend to take a very closer look at this document and potentially bring it back up. I'm sorry for not having taken a scrupulous look at it previously in that regard. And thank you, Greg and other town staff for the work that's gone into this. I think a significant portion of it will be used. So, all right, moving on, long agenda. Next item on the agenda is consider request from Conservation and Trails Committee to increase membership to 9 seats. Greg?
There's a request, and I believe somebody from the Conservation and Trails Committee is here to speak to the request.
Hi, I'm Mike Spader, Vice Chair for the CTC Committee, and designated representative. I believe that that the members of the Select Board have received a memorandum from Darren Shibler. We are requesting that our charter be changed to go from 7 members of the Conservation and Trail Committee to 9 members. We have a rather aggressive agenda, trying to get things done, and we think that we can benefit by bringing in some additional members. And we make that formal request to the board.
All right, great. Thanks. Any board member comments? You might get some questions, so stay there. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Pat?
Yeah, I'm curious, how often has your board been at full membership, or has at any point in the last 5 or 10 years, have you been under membership? Just wondering,
I think right now we have 1 opening and 3 people that have applied for that position. And I think that there's consideration to appoint a couple of them at the end of your meeting. Frankly, we have a couple of these are very well qualified, and we think that they can bring a lot of value to what we do. And that is part of, instead of having them as just volunteers, we'd like to have them as full-fledged members of the committee.
I guess what I'm asking is, in the past, rather than right now, I understand where we are right now with the interviews. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that we've actually had several requests to change the size of committees, certainly since I've been on the board. And honestly, typically, I think we've usually denied those requests because the number of members on a committee can fluctuate. The amount of interest in any committee can fluctuate. If we move you up to 9, then it's a 5 quorum to get things done. But if you lose 3 members or 4 members, then you guys start looking to be in very rough shape. So it's, again, I can't, this is not 100%, but in the past, I think that we've been usually reluctant to expand it just because of, a time of temporary, influx of interest. And maybe this will continue for, in fact, I hope it does continue for some time. But people can still be volunteers and they can still attend these meetings. I guess my question then is, if I want to rephrase it, do you need 9 committee members, or can you continue with 7 and have volunteers from the community? I guess quite simply knowing that.
We certainly can continue at 7. Right now we do have 1 vacancy that we're hoping to fill. We happen to have the luxury right now of having some additional interested members that we thought might make for very good members of that board. But we see it, and as you see it, it does fluctuate. And yes, we could very well come back asking to go back to 7. So with that being said, our recommendation is to the board that you consider changing the charter to 9, but we respect your wishes.
Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
I see Greg, your hand's up. Do you have some history you want to share?
Yeah, to answer, thank you. To answer Pat's question, a little bit of history of the Conservation and Trails Committee. Used to be 2 separate committees. There were 2 5-member committees. They met, they had an overlapping meeting once a month, and it was largely to review development applications. The Conservation could look at it from a environmental conservation standpoint. The Trails Committee would look at applications, trails, sidewalk, path perspective. Both committees had trouble through those ebbs and flows, and Sometimes the Trails Committee would have 5 members and the Conservation Committee would have 2, and it would meet for informational purposes, but not to make any decisions. Sometimes it would flip-flop. Conservation Committee would be full and the Trails Committee would be down numbers. So a few years ago, staff made a recommendation, and the committees made a recommendation to combine to get the 7-member committee. Since then, it has ebbed and flowed a bit. I think generally it's been full, but I just recently, and great that there's interest, but you appointed, I think, 4 members pretty recently, because there were 4 openings. There's now a 5th one, so there is some ebb and flow to it. Darren Schibler, the town planner, and I, who staffs the committee, had spoken about this and absolutely respecting the recommendation from the Conservation and Trails Committee, but our concern is that it does ebb and flow. Thinking about other options of ways to get people involved. There's been projects in the past, and putting the word out has usually a pretty good community response in terms of people helping out with projects, whether that's a street tree inventory, Indian Brook cleanups. Owiso Makuku, our community development director, had the suggestion of perhaps appointing alternates to a committee rather than increasing the membership. The Planning Commission has that, for instance, in place now. That way you have people who are committed to going to the meeting, staying up to speed, beyond just the single project volunteer component, but also gives you a little bit of flexibility, so there's not a request coming back to lower the membership or increase the membership based on the number of seats or applicants that are there. So obviously staff will like the Conservation and Trails Committee, respect the decision of the Select Board, but just wanted to share some of that history that you asked about, Pat, and give you staff's perspective on this request and others that may come up for other committees as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Tracy.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with this, especially given that, the history that was just given. I do agree that the CTC does have a very ambitious work plan. Their charge is sort of all encompassing. And I would like to focus on this more from, I'll use it again, I guess the tree level, not the leaf level, around, are our committees really able to focus and serve the purpose for which they were formed? And whether that means reworking their charge, reworking their membership, combining or making the connections between their work plans. Again, I go back to a RACI matrix, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed on any sort of project. So I'd really like to, not necessarily now with our workload, but I'd like to look at this through the lens of the entire committee structure rather than just this one request. But with that said, I don't see an issue with this. The need is obviously there. The desire is obviously there.
Thanks, Tracy. Don, any comments? So I guess to be Tracy, to be clear, you're saying you're okay with expanding to 9?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Don, did you?
I agree with
anything?
Tracy.
So, Greg, you mentioned the alternate option. Do we have a plan for dealing with alternates with regard to who gets paid a stipend? Because we're
I don't believe we have factored that into our stipend discussion yet. I'll have to check tomorrow, but I don't think we have any guidance on that yet.
okay. All right. So because the questions that come to my mind are, is it only the voting members? Because presumably, if you have voting members plus alternate, all the voting members plus the alternates, then the voting members would get. I don't know. Would everybody get the stipend, or is it just the voting members who happen to be there establishing the quorum? And then the other question is, the weird scenario is if you start a meeting because you have quorum that includes an alternate and then a regular member shows up, what happens with regard to who votes, and also who, is there a, does the stipend come into a weird situation there as well? I don't know how that's being handled, but I was intrigued by the alternate option. Then I started scratching my head over I think we would need that. Somebody would need to establish a policy around dealing with the stipends, and also who gets to vote if an alternate comes in. All right. So I guess the question is whether to expand from 7 to 9. Sounds like there's some support, but let's go to any other board member comments. See some hands up. Betsy Dunn.
Thank you, Andy. I'm a member of the Conservation and Trails Committee as well. And like Mike, I do think that having the additional people on the committee, especially with the expertise that we're seeing in them, and the things that we have on our list that directly apply to them, and they would be, I really think committees are ways that we build leadership. And I think when committees are engaged and are working on projects that the community becomes aware of, I think it generates a certain amount of energy, not only on the committee, but also within the town. I think committees that, take on this kind of work really do help the town develop leadership. And that's what you want to do, because certainly you don't want to be sitting on the board when you're 90 and have people follow you. And this is a ladder as far as I'm concerned. And I think the 9 is really going to help us do what we have to do this year. And it may take longer than this year. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Annie Cooper.
Hi, thanks, Andy. Personally, I don't mind how many members are on any committee. My concern is that one of the candidates for 2 committees this evening is.
So we're not going to attack anybody, please.
I'm not attacking anyone, but I have a right to speak publicly.
You do?
Right. So you're preventing me from speaking publicly is uncomfortable.
I'm just cautioning you to not attack any members of the public.
I don't think it's inappropriate. So when we look at committees and we look at who's serving them, we need to recognize if they have public interest at heart. And the fact that you were already preventing me from speaking about what I want to speak with tells me that you know what I mean. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. Mary Post.
Hi, I just wanted to say that listening to this reminds me of the whole Memorial Hall debacle. And it's like, I think, things don't stay the same. And I think a lot of people now are getting more interested in the environment and more interested in, the treasures that we have in our town and what can we do to save them, make them better. And so I just don't agree with the idea that, well, they had trouble in the past keeping people. I said, here's a group now that is asking for more help because they really want to do more. And I think that's what should be looked at, and not, oh, in the past, this didn't work. Like most of us, at least that I talked to, didn't know about Memorial Hall. And as soon as we heard Memorial Hall was maybe going to quit their committee, several of us volunteered to be on there. And all of a sudden the whole thing is shelved, not to be heard about again. And it makes me wonder who's really pulling the strings, what's really going on. Here you ask for community involvement, people want to, and then it just goes away. So I really support this committee asking for more members, because I think that they're only going to help, take care of what we have in our town that I think we're in danger of losing if we don't take care of it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary. Any other comments from the public?
There's one in the room.
All right, great.
Hi, Irene Renner. I am Exhibit A of someone who
Started on a committee and merger task force back in 2005, and I've been a devoted volunteer in various capacities ever since. I still wave at people who are driving the town rolling stock. I still feel like I'm part of the team. And in fact, I am part of the team. I serve on the Essex Energy Committee for the 15th or 16th year, and I'm known as the institutional memory. I also publish a newspaper in town as a member of the Fourth Estate to be a check and balance on the government that I love and I want to see do its best. There is no reason to criticize anyone for reporting for a newspaper and also wanting to serve their town.
Irene, we're talking about expanding a committee, number of people on a committee. Thank you.
Support increasing the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Full disclosure, Irene and I spoke about the Energy Committee on my front porch, and that was what got me into politics as well. So happens to others as well. Okay, any other? Betsy, Dunn, and Mary Post, you both still have your hands up. But I'm not going to call on you. I'm just pointing out that your hands are still up. Dawn.
Given that there appears to be no more discussion from the public, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the request from Conservation and Trails to increase their membership to 9.
Thank you, Dawn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, now this reminds me, and we'll have to go back to the prior motion as well, but I remembered during the past discussion that if we're attending remotely, we have to do a roll call vote if it's not unanimous. So Don, your vote.
Aye.
Tracy, your vote.
Aye.
Pat, your vote.
Nay.
Okay, and my vote is aye. Okay, we neglected to do that on the previous motion for the consideration of the position statement. So my apologies to return to that, but Don, your vote.
Was an aye.
Tracy, your vote.
Aye.
Pat, your vote.
Was a nay.
And my vote was a nay also. Sorry, I neglected to do that the last time. So just to fill that in and do proper procedure. Okay, so moving on to the next business item, business item F, 6F, consider authorizing Unified Manager to sign the letter of support for Unified Planning Work Program requests. Dennis, I still see you're still here.
Still here. That's fine. I apologize for bringing this up on the active part of the business part of your agenda, but the Regional Planning Commission requires that you have the opportunity for public input. And if it was on the consent agenda, we couldn't do that. So that's why it's here. Every year, the Regional Planning Commission puts out requests for obtaining requests from the various towns, municipalities for doing work under the Unified Planning Work Program. And every year, since probably I've been here, at least recently, we've submitted requests for work from the Regional Planning Commission. This year, the list is smaller and some of it's probably routine, but I wanted to go over the list. It's basically 3 projects. The first project is televising our stormwater pipes. We've gotten grants for the last 2 years of $50,000 each year. We've been able to do the first year of that. We'll be doing the second year of that grant in the spring. My understanding from talking to the Regional Planning Commission is that because of COVID and the financial situation, they're going to have additional funds. So this year we put a request in for $100,000 to hopefully complete our televising of all the old storm lines throughout the town. If we don't get the 100,000, we've requested that they at least provide what they've done in the past, which is 50,000 would allow us to get a 3rd year in of doing that televising. That leads to finding where the pipes are bad, where they need to be lined. Most of these are old metal pipes, 50 years old, rusted. And we did some lining this year to the tune of over $100,000 on Sand Hill Road. And we plan to do more as we go forward. The second item, we always request they do some traffic counts. We tend to request their traffic counts on the heavily traveled roads. Ours will be more on our side roads. We did provide a list of roads we'd like to have them do this year. That is not, there's no local charge to us for doing that. It's just work that they would perform with their interns. The third area is important. It's every 4 or 5 years, we should really do an update to the road management plan. I would like to start that, probably will not finish it until, or Aaron will finish it probably later this summer or fall. But a key component of that is looking at the condition of our roads and having the interns from the Regional Planning Commission go out and do what's called a PCI test, or pavement condition index. Looks at cracking, looks at potholes, looks at the condition of the roads, rates those roads, and then we use those roads to essentially combine with our own analysis to look at what roads need to be paved over the next 4 or 5 years and establish a priority based on the pavement condition index. We then throw in things like traffic counts. Obviously, a road could be in bad shape, but if it's only got 50 cars a day and we've got Susie Wilson Road with 35 or 30,000 cars a day, it can make a difference in terms of which ones we tackle first. But the PCI is the first starting point of that. We've collected that about every 4 to 5 years. We want to do that again and have them essentially do the work, and they would underwrite that cost. That's the 3 requests. So the recommendation is that you approve our requests, and that the select board, if they do approve them, authorize the manager to sign a letter essentially indicating that it was presented to the public tonight. That's it.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Any board member comments or questions? Any questions or comments from the public? Any hands in the room, Greg?
No.
Nope, not seeing any. So, Don.
Seeing there's no discussion from the public, I make the motion that we authorize the Unified Manager to sign a letter in support of the Unified Planning Work Program request.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think Pat got that one. Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. All right. Okay, on to 6G, discussion and potential action about including retail cannabis opt-in vote on town meeting ballot. So Pat, I remember back at the beginning of the year, beginning of last year, you had wanted to manage this topic when we talked about it, but I neglected to reach out to you before this meeting. Do you want to take the reins, or you want me to handle it?
Oh no, you can go for it, Andy. I'm not prepped, so I could probably do it
Okay,
extemporaneously, but
yeah, my apologies for not prompting you on that.
yeah, no
So,
worries.
okay. So the situation, as I understand it, Greg, did you want to go through something, or you want me to run down the situation at this point?
Go for it. I can chime in if you need me to.
All right. So we had been anticipating a petition to put the vote for retail cannabis opt-in on the ballot for town meeting, and the petitioner reached out to the town back in November, and there was a request that the petitioner wait until January so that we wouldn't have to have a special election to do the vote based on the timing of the petition. And so the petitioner agreed to do that and was happy to accommodate the request of the town. But it turns out when the petition was turned in, a number of them were not valid registered voters of Essex. And so it's on the order of 250 signatures short. So the question is, given that we need to warn the town meeting agenda next week, the question is, do we want to go ahead and go forward with warning or asking town staff to put together the appropriate wording for us to warn it ourselves, or do we want to push back to the petitioner to obtain more signatures? I miss anything, Greg? Go ahead.
Just the one thing about if I think the deadline is passed either today or tomorrow. It might have already passed in terms of getting more signatures for the ballot. So if there is a petition that comes in, it would probably end up being a special election at some point. And
Gotcha.
with that.
But I guess to be totally clear though, we don't have a town vote in April. There is a vote in April, but it's not. There's currently no intent to have any town questions on that.
Correct. There's the townwide vote for the school district, and there's a village.
Right.
There's no at this point. There's no municipal town business planned for April.
And so that would drive, if that is a potential for a future voting date, but we would have to either we'd have to print our own ballot. We have to print a ballot to go with the school districts, right? So that's an unexpected cost. So, okay. All right, Don, I see your hand up.
Given that our town cannabis committee has met, opt in and opt out, we're not making a commitment. We're just, by opting in, we can continue to participate in a discussion with the state. And we can make, our own decisions further on. By opting out, then that shuts the door for us to establish any kind of future with cannabis. I just encourage us to put it on the ballot. We have to print the ballot anyway. This is the time to do it, not make a special ballot or a special election.
So I know, Don, you're on you're a member of the committee that's investigating this situation. And so the opt-in versus opt-out is whether we would allow retail establishments in the town of Essex.
Correct.
Right. We still have the opportunity. Do we still have the opportunity to affect the zoning that would apply to such establishments?
You do by opting in. If you have choice to opt out, you have no say.
Right.
My understanding. That's my understanding.
If you opt out, then you can't have a cannabis retail operation in.
That's right.
Right. There's no. Maybe I step back a little bit. There's no control over growing, processing, packaging, any of that. That's all controlled by the state. As long and I assume that we have zoning that allows that kind of use in it. But the opt-in and opt-out is for retail only. And Greg, question I have, and maybe I'm stepping on too many questions here, is do we have time to adjust zoning? The schedule here is if we were to vote in March, they still can't open anything until October.
Correct. So yeah, the retail establishments issued by the state are supposed to be effective in October. The Planning Commission has already started to have very preliminary conversations about how to implement zoning around retail cannabis. So they do have a bit of a runway, and it is something that they've started talking about. Obviously, the more time they have, better to prepare for it.
What is the zoning change process?
Once the Planning Commission approves zoning changes, it is warned for a public hearing and it goes to the select board. I can't remember if it's one public hearing or two, but it starts with the Planning Commission, then goes to the select board before final approval.
Okay, so there's no townwide vote for zoning.
No.
You don't have to have zoning available necessarily for town meeting vote.
Correct.
Or for a warning of the town meeting. No. Okay. Great. Maybe I'll allow others to ask questions. Pat, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Don. More specifically because there was every intent made by the petitioners and the select board to accommodate us putting the question on the ballot because we assumed the petition signatures would be there. For full disclosure, I did get a phone call from Meredith Mann explaining, she was the original petitioner. She explained, her viewpoint as she had it. There is every intention to, if we don't put this on the ballot, to continue collecting signatures. I have no reason to doubt that they won't get them. At which point, simply, we are just spending $10,000 on something that we know is coming. I think we could sit here and equivocate about whether or not they'll get the other 200 signatures, but I don't think that I don't think that the petitioners see that as a huge stumbling block, and honestly, neither do I. I think that they're more than halfway there. So really, to me, this is simply a question of, do we put it on the ballot when we know we can fold it in with the other items, or do we wait and pay an extra? I don't know. I said 10,000. I think it's somewhere in the 10 to 15,000 range. Assuming that we can't somehow also get onto the April ballot. Just seems much cleaner to me, especially since the petitioners were very gracious in waiting to submit their petition. They could have submitted this easily back in November, December. So I think that from what we told them and with what was expected of them, I feel that we should put it on the ballot and just simply get it done instead of having to do it later. And then I think that honestly also will answer a lot of the questions about zoning, because if it's a no in the town, then we know that work doesn't have to get done. But if it's a yes, then they have until October to make the changes, get feedback, do whatever we need to do from a town policy standpoint. So I would support this along with Dawn for putting this on the ballot.
Thanks, Pat. Tracy.
I would support this as well. It feels almost a little underhanded to ask the petitioner to hold off. And then when they do turn in the petition and then the signatures are verified, they don't have enough. And then it's, oh, nope, sorry. It just feels wrong to me fundamentally. Community members have been asking for this. I see no harm in putting it on the ballot. If it does pass, we have roughly 7 months to put in place the zoning and other discussions that we need to have. So I have no issue with putting it on the ballot.
All right, thanks, Tracy. Greg, I'm going to tax your planning experience again here. So establishments can open in October. If they're opening in October, when do we have to have the zoning in place? I mean, when can somebody put in a permit request if we vote March 1st?
Sure. My understanding of it would be that if the zone, that they would have to comply with current zoning regulations, which
Yep.
I guess that's a question of, would this be considered an undefined use or a retail use? That's getting into the weeds of planning and zoning.
Yeah.
But if something is permitted before zoning changes, it would be allowed to remain in effect.
Right.
Zoning changes, any new business coming in after that change would have to abide by the new rules.
Okay, so yep, it does. It absolutely clarifies it, right? That March 1st, when we vote, somebody can come down to the town offices on March 2nd and pull a permit for a retail establishment. Is that correct?
I don't.
Or do we know that?
This is and Don, jump in since you've been on the Cannabis Committee. I think the state is not issuing its permits yet, and it's going to take a little while.
Right.
We're still waiting on the Cannabis Control Board at the state level to make some of these final decisions.
I believe not till the 1st
Okay.
of July, Greg, so
1st of July, you said, Don?
that's what I understood.
Okay. Yeah. So I think there is some.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure there was time to actually put and I'm not I'm not using that as an argument not to put it on the ballot. I just want to understand the ramifications, the timeline, because we haven't really had too much discussion about cannabis. So, all right. So, Tracy, I see your hands back up again.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but from my understanding through final rulemaking, sort of what I see as the most important parts of regulations are set where they can't be cited within 1,000 feet of schools and daycares. I think that's important to note. So that doesn't take any lift on our part. Local zoning, that's at the state level, and most of those regulations are in place at the state level.
All right, great, thanks, Tracy. Okay, so then we will go to public comment. I want to remind folks again that the evening is passing here, and I need to get up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning to go to work. So if you can keep your comments brief, and if you are okay with agreeing with somebody ahead of you, go ahead and do that if it works for you. Let's try to move this along if we can. So I see Raj Chawla's hand up first.
Hey, thanks, Andy. I think your comment just now about keeping comments brief about a topic like this as the 6th or 5th item on the agenda at 9:10 at night kind of speaks to what I'm about to say. So I'm here to ask the select board to engage the community in a thoughtful and complete conversation about the pros and cons of electing to opt in on retail sale of cannabis in Essex. It should be a massive red flag to our community and this board that we are here discussing this issue now because a petition was filed. The select board and municipal staff, excuse me, have not had time to bring this to a community conversation and had to rely on a petition to push the question. This petition, however, failed to garner the requisite signatures, falling short by 225 people, or 25%. Regardless of the petitioner's willingness to wait to submit this petition, they failed to follow the clear guidelines to garner the 5% of signatures from Essex residents. And now we find that the select board, worried about a special election mid-year, is willing to consider overlooking that fact and may place this question on the ballot for March 1st, just 6 weeks from now. As it relates to a date for a vote, we have a state and national election this November, and as there will be a Senate and House election, I would expect turnout to be very high. We should maximize that turnout on such an important topic. In addition, retail sales won't begin until October. This delay on voting should not be a significant hardship to our residents. While petitioning for a vote could arrive mid-year, I hope any petitioner would consider the points I make above before asking the community to incur the extra cost of a special election. Essex residents will see no tax benefit from the retail sale of cannabis without also approving a local option tax. This means, for instance, that if retail sales correspond to an increase in any law enforcement activity or increased need for social services that we subscribe to, this will be borne by existing budgets, and Essex taxpayers will be fully liable. They would not recoup any of these costs from the sale of cannabis because we have not had a community conversation on the local option tax. Many do not really realize this. The select board has indicated earlier this month that in no way does the board or staff have time and resources to engage the community on adding a local option tax, which is a rather straightforward 1% addition sales tax to purchases. I would argue that the impacts of adding a 1% sales tax are dwarfed by the financial, societal, and public health impacts of allowing a retail sale of cannabis. If you have acknowledged that you have no time for community outreach on a lot due to lack of board and staff time, how can you possibly engage on the topic of cannabis in the next 6 weeks prior to a vote? It has been said that once the vote is done, the real work will be via zoning. Changing zoning can be a long technical process, and the results of that discussion should inform the community's decision on whether they agree with retail sales and not the other way around. It seems counterintuitive to ask someone to approve of these sales without first knowing where they might occur. Clearly, after this conversation this evening, there are many questions that staff can't answer and more answers coming in the chat that staff probably haven't seen yet. Residents are being asked to make a decision on retail sales without having a final set of rules from the state's Cannabis Control Board. Rules are in proposed form and only 2 are in public comment. Several still need to be taken up and none are final. Again, why would we vote on something where we do not have actual facts and a complete rule book? Full and accurate information regarding the impact of retail sales of cannabis in Essex is largely absent from any of our municipal resources.
I worry that this effort will mirror the ineffective effort of collecting community input on the local option tax. The information hosted on our town and village website is incomplete. A request for corrections and information additions relating to the area of public health impacts was made by a content expert, the person who delivered your presentation in December. Instead of correcting information and adding accurate information, all mention of any public health info was removed. Are there any public health experts on the informal municipal cannabis committee? It consists of town and village staff, one trustee and a select board member, but has met infrequently and held only one hastily arranged public hearing that was poorly attended. In addition, taking this vote forces the village of Essex Junction to move forward in a way in which it may not be ready, as we have not met the criteria I've outlined above. How are you forcing this? Unlike with alcohol, the village may form its own cannabis control board and regulate retail cannabis sales within its borders. But if the town votes to do this first, it supersedes unless the village has had the opportunity to vote. Should the village decide to wait to have the kind of educational fact-based conversation with our community it deserves, the town could approve a business within the village, regardless of what village residents want. To wrap up, I'm asking the board to choose to engage in a complete, thoughtful, factual, and functional dialogue about whether we want retail sales in Essex, and if so, where should sales occur and how. I'm asking the board to resist the expedient path for one that prioritizes its residents over business interests. You'll notice I didn't bring forth any arguments for or against the sale of cannabis. I don't make any claims above. I only ask the board take the time to discuss this, to bring in experts and provide accurate, complete information to ensure voters are ready to call the question. The state has put us in this untenable position of having to make a choice like this with little to no information. I argue there's simply no rush. You can opt in at any point in time. Thanks.
Thanks, Raj. Betsy Dunn.
Thank you, Andy. Well, I disagree with Raj. I'm sorry for saying that. I shouldn't have said it. I apologize. I do believe that opting in or opting out is something that is not a new term for people. I think they've heard this before. Do they know everything about cannabis? Probably not. But I think just having the question asked, do you want it or don't you want it in your town? And I think that they can answer that question. And I think it's good to have it done because I think the people who are potentially the sellers, having the retail shops, would like to know and get that off their bucket list and go somewhere else to put it into a different town that has opted in. And whether or not we gain a lot because of the local option tax or not, you know, I buy beer at the Essex Essex beverage, and there's no local option tax there. It's something I enjoy. And I'm sure the people who would enjoy the marijuana would feel the same way. It'll be, but I think just the opting in or opting out is the issue at this point. And I think that's really what we need to focus on. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Mariah Flynn at Sanderson.
Hi, thank you. I also wanted to strongly advocate that there is absolutely no reason to rush. Similar to Raj, I think this is a really important decision with very long-lasting impacts on public health and the youth of the community and our ability to have a thriving and healthy community. And there is the way that the law was set up, we are allowed to hold an opt-in or opt-out vote at any point in time. There is no time limit on that. So we can hold it 5 years from now if we want. We can hold it in October. But there is a lot of reason to take caution in how you proceed with this. There's, I think, as someone who works in both public health but also substance use prevention work, this is one of the substances where I've seen the biggest disconnect between the public understanding of where we are with this substance, the potency that it looks like now, and the types of products that are available now, and where the public understanding of that is. And so I think it's really behooves our community to make sure that we understand that people know what they're voting for or voting on. And that at this point, none of us know what we're voting on because the regulations or the procedures around what this legislation looks like, or what this law will look like, are still under consideration at the state level. So we still, all of those decisions won't be made until April. So if we have a vote before that, essentially you're asking for community members to vote on something we don't even know what we're voting about. And it's clear, honestly, from the conversations I've attended around these meetings, is that even the folks on the select board, both at the village and the town, don't understand what the options are and what's going to happen, and what is coming up and what's going to impact our town. So I think it makes sense for all of us to have the time to be really thorough and thoughtful about this. There's things that we haven't even discussed, things like water quality in our town that we haven't looked at. What's the impact of that going to be? As someone who really cares about the environmental impact, I think there's a whole bunch of pieces to consider there. There's public nuisance around odors that we haven't looked at. There's public health impacts. There's impacts on increasing substance use rates and accessibility of the substance and promotion to youth in the community. There's all sorts of things that we really need to take the time to be thoughtful for. And I think, as Raj was mentioning, there's no real benefits locally to us in terms of financial incentives. So, but there is potential financial cost to us locally. So we really need to be thoughtful about what that's going to look like. I'd really encourage us to not try to rush through something that feels like a really long, really important decision long term. And just to clarify, the actual current recommendations, although it's not put into policy yet, but the CCB's current recommendations are that there is a 500-foot barrier from schools only. That does not include daycare centers. But their current recommendations is a 500-foot from schools. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mariah. Brian Armstrong.
So first and foremost, thank you to the volunteers of the town. I'm amazed at how hard you guys work to see both sides through. I am one of the owners of Magic Man who put forth that petition. I'm also was born and raised in Essex. And while I applaud the open dialogue, I second the motion of those people, or the idea of those people, to put it on the ballot. We, as somebody who grew up in Essex and believes in the value of the community, it was really important to me that we looked at Essex to create jobs. We fully support the idea of a local tax when it's appropriate. Put it on. We'd love to pay it, because we think this is going to be an opportunity to responsibly bring cannabis, which is already in the community, responsibly bring it into the community. Secondly, to create jobs. And thirdly, I do believe there's a source of tax revenue for the residents of Essex. I will agree with the town, one person who spoke on behalf of the town, that we worked really, really hard to safely get these signatures in one of the most interesting time in our country's society or history to get these signatures. Certainly, if we had forced the issue in November, if all our petitions were correct or signatures correct, we would have cost the town, I heard, anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. We were asked to be responsible. We stepped back. We did that. Unfortunately, yes, there were some errors with the signatures. So I do believe, it's in everybody's interest to put this on the ballot, not to agree to anything, but just put it on the ballot. And like Ms. Dunn said, just get a pulse of where the community residents are. If not, I politely challenge Raj and the other woman who spoke. While I appreciate your concerns, I'm the parent of 3 children. And I can tell you, I'd be far more concerned personally about the sale of alcohol than the sale of marijuana, especially when done in a heavily regulated fashion. But unfortunately, it's not going to be November. I think Pat Murray is correct. If unfortunately it's not on the ballot, yes, I believe in this community. I believe in creating jobs, and there's a chance that we will secure those in the very near future. That is not our preferred course. We think it's a great community. We love to work with you guys. We've got, somebody from our company also lives in Essex, just about to speak. And again, we want to be responsible, bring cannabis in a responsible fashion to the community in a way that respects concerns, add jobs, and create taxes. Thank you very much for your time, folks.
All right, thanks, Brian. Meredith Mann.
Hi, thank you for having me. I wanted to touch on a few points. One is I want to be clear that this opt-in vote is for retail only. It is not for cultivation, so it has nothing to do with odors and, stigmas such as that. So to be really careful about knowing what you're voting for. And that's kind of what I really want to touch on, is that Magic Man is really all about education. We welcome everybody walking in our door, no matter where you stand on this issue, and talking to us and having a dialogue. I just really want to stress that we want to help with the education. We want to make sure that no voters in Essex are left without the information they need. And that will continue on as long as Magic Man is standing in Essex. So it's something we really believe in and can speak to. We've done a lot of work with the control board and with the cannabis community, and we want to share that with the Essex community. And we feel like we can be a very positive asset. And I second what Brian said, where no one's more sorry than me with all the hard work that the petition numbers fell short. We could have gone out all weekend and collected them. I frankly didn't want to expose our community or my employees this weekend, and felt like I had faith in Essex to do the right thing and really just let the people vote on it. And I really hope that you will come to me for education and information throughout this process, and that I can help you confidently put this on the ballot for March 1st. And I really wholeheartedly hope all of you can support us and vote yes, so we can create jobs and get going. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Meredith. Karen Moino.
Hi, thank you very much. I agree wholeheartedly with Mariah and Raj. I too have lived in Essex for a long time, about 20 years. I am a parent. I have 4 daughters, 2 who are graduates of Essex High School, 2 are current students at the high school. I believe that our youth will be negatively impacted by the sale of cannabis in our community. I do agree that education is needed, and I encourage the public to look at the health impacts of youth in Colorado, where it's been legalized. Recreational cannabis has been legalized since 2012. There's a lot of information out there, and they can check out Blue Rising Together, and they have worked with creating some new laws in Colorado to address the problems that they've had that have negatively impacted the youth. The other thing I'd like to say is that I've heard that putting on the ballot is getting a pulse. I don't think it's like taking a survey. I'm assuming it's a binding vote. So if it's voted on, then it's in and the licenses can be granted. So it's not really taking a pulse. It's a binding vote. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Karen. Okay, now I see someone that says Kemener's iPhone. Could you please identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Kemener Whalen. I'm a Essex resident. I am involved with Magic Man as well as some other businesses in my everyday life. But really, I'm speaking as a resident of Essex. So this is legislation. This opt-in, opt-out language has been coming from the state for a long time. So Essex is really just the conduit of that state level legislation. And so it's my view as an Essex resident that I want to have that opportunity in line with the rest of the towns, because there was sort of a town meeting day 2022 deadline, which did change throughout the course of the process, to do this opt-in, opt-out vote. So as an Essex resident, I want the opportunity to be able to sort of participate in that democratic process. And while certainly it's not getting a quote unquote pulse, there is the opportunity for the town to react accordingly from a zoning perspective. And then sort of lastly, let us not kid ourselves. Chittenden County is very small. Whether Essex opts in or opts out, which should be up to the townspeople to vote on when every other town is voting on it, they're going to be able to go to Winooski or Williston or South Burlington, right? So let's not pretend that preventing retail sales in Essex will somehow isolate Essex from being a part of the cannabis industry overall. It is likely that opt-in, opt-out will come up as something to consider. They did it in Colchester with Costco, you know, affectionately referred to as the Costco tax. So I certainly urge the board to have voters voice themselves as a conduit to the state legislation, because that's what the state has dictated. Let the towns speak. They're the conduit of the state legislative process. I think it's important that we have retail. Having a regulated market will increase the health and safety outcomes as it relates to an unregulated black market. So it's certainly my hope that the board will include this as a ballot measure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Connor. See, I don't see any other hands. Raj, you already spoke.
Love to add one additional thing, Andy.
It's quick.
Yeah, I would just remind the board or point out that it appears that there's not clarity amongst the four of you that are here tonight as to what the impact of this is, what opting in actually does, what this vote will mean for the community, and how it will affect the zoning process. You know, we've been through a lot of petitions in our past bunch of years here. We've been through a lot of recent votes where there was a lot of hesitation on moving forward with something without all the facts. And it's very clear, if nothing else tonight, that this board doesn't have those facts and should probably wait. I'm going to say, I'm not necessarily against having this.
Raj, you're repeating yourself.
I'm not against
you've
having
already-
this. I haven't said that before. I'm just want to make sure you all know what you're voting on when you approve this for the ballot. Thanks.
Thanks, Raj. Greg, are there any hands in the room?
Yes, there's yes, one in the room.
All right.
Hi, Irene Renner. Full disclosure, I signed the petition over the weekend at Magic Man because I think people should be able to weigh in. Petition I signed mentioned a November voting date that has long passed. I would like the select board to consider warning this for April. That would give Magic Man the assurance they need that they will hear from people, but it would buy us an extra 6 weeks as a community to learn about this issue and learn exactly what is required of us, what this vote would mean, etc. The former police chief, as well as the current police chief, to my understanding, is not for this. We need to know why. Please give us some more time to think about this as a community, to have conversations, to perhaps even have them in person. The pandemic makes all of this harder. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Lorraine Zaloom.
Hi, Andy. Thank you for taking my comments. I agree with Patrick and the others that it is a moot point because it is going to pass, and either and I understand what Irene is saying about needing more time, but we've been asking for this for quite some time now, and there has been plenty of time. I prefer a regulated market as soon as possible. I understand that there's arguments that will further drive a black market. I don't think so, given that there's so much research now across the country in terms of models to follow and models not to follow. We have a lot of time to work things out. This is just to decide whether the community wants to do this or not. And I hear Raj's concerns. I understand there's a lot of health issues, but the reality is the majority of people are users. And so to me, the sooner we start educating the public on how it impacts your health negatively, I think the better off we are. I also support that this will support a local business as well as jobs and drive business to more business to Essex, which I think is a phenomenal thing. So for those that speak about lot, it would be possibly a further way to support that call for people who are looking for an LOT. But anyway, I would appreciate, given that this has been months in request that is finally being brought up, I would appreciate you all voting yes. Thank you for your time.
All right, thanks, Lorraine. Okay, I don't see any other hands. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Although Brian Armstrong and Lorraine Zaloom, you both still have your hands up. Thank you. Okay, I'll bring this back to the board. Any comments from the board based on the inputs that we heard? Patrick?
Apologies. I take somewhat exception to the idea that the four of us don't know what we're talking about, or that the four of us aren't on the same page. I think that there are a number of rules that are in place that the state, has to work through. But I also believe that to not put this on the ballot would be to ignore much of the reality, which is that right now we know that there are multiple towns very close to us that have already passed this. I feel it's the duty of the select board to kind of honor the request that we made of the original petitioners. And to be honest, legalization of marijuana in Colorado 2012, it's 10 years ago now. I feel that if people have not come to an opinion or done a research on it by this point, I'm not really sure that an additional 4 months into April is going to prove to be that much of a difference. I think that the material is out there. I think that the research is out there for people to avail themselves of. And then we allow simply the residents of our town to decide if they want it or not. We're putting this on the ballot, or rather, I would propose that we put this on the ballot and then let the town decide. I'm not swayed by the idea or the decision that I don't know what I'm doing.
Thanks, Pat. Tracy or Don, any other comments?
Yeah, I actually went and looked at the legislation because back in the fall, we had conversations around zoning and advertising and things of that sort. The legislation does seem to include restrictions on where advertisement can take place. For example, you can't advertise in a place where any more than 15% of people seeing that advertisement can reasonably be under 21 years old. So that type of detail is included in the legislation. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Tracy. Don, more comment?
No, can I make a motion that we put it on the ballot?
No, I want to make a comment first.
All right, go ahead.
So my comment is related to the wording that was used in the petition around, how to word the warning. It talks about city ordinances, and let's see, the way I'm just going to read what I wrote here. The way the petition is worded sounds like it would be warning both the town, the village, and the town. I would strongly prefer to modify the language to reflect that we're warning for a town vote on the town opting in. We have no jurisdiction to warn over the village. Yes, I understand the vote would apply to the entire town, including the village, but I don't feel that the wording of the question should imply anything other than a vote for the town. This is what I had sent to Greg in my comments earlier. I'm just kind of reading it off. The wording of the petition also mentions city ordinances. I think this portion of the question needs to be made more generic for the town, or should be just removed. I'm bringing this up because the motion tonight, I don't necessarily want to include the exact words of the warning, so that, and do we, can we ask town staff to come back with appropriate wording that we can, we're going to be warning the budget. We're going to do the whole warning for town meeting next week, right? So I'm questioning whether we can go ahead and make a vote tonight with the expectation that we'll vote on the final wording next week. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the motion. We put the question on the ballot. We can word it however we want next week, or however the
Does that work
employee-
for you? Does that work for you, Greg?
Yeah, I think if you direct staff to come up with the proper wording to put the question of opt-in, opt-out retail cannabis on the ballot, we can bring that back to you.
So I think what, the question is if, can we vote to warn tonight, but approve the language next week? Or I think I seen your nod, Greg,
Yeah, I would
or,
say something like direct staff to provide the wording to put this question on the ballot.
okay.
If that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, and so I guess the risk there is that we then have this whole discussion again next week. That's where or am I overthinking things here?
Why would you have the discussion again? It's already, the only discussion we have, you're changing the wording on the ballot. You're not going to have a discussion on opt-in or opt-out again. You only have a discussion on the wording, nothing else.
Well, I'm not so sure that's what Greg said, though.
You'll see the town meeting warning next week, which will be, you'll approve the warning for town meeting, which would theoretically include the wording for the question about retail cannabis. Assuming that's the
Okay.
you give tonight.
Okay, so
You're
you want,
you're kind of approving it twice.
yeah,
I don't think you need to have a whole second conversation next week. I think you've had that tonight.
okay. All right, so if we, I'm just trying to walk through the wording of the motion. If we word the motion to say, I guess, how would you recommend we word the motion then? You're suggesting that we ask town staff to come back with the appropriate wording for the warning, but do we make a motion to approve warning, opt-in, opt-out, and ask staff to come back with the appropriate wording to put on the ballot? Or
I think something like that. So for instance, you've approved the budget, the select board's budget proposal.
right,
Which is there. That's going to be on the ballot. You know that's going to be on the ballot. This is, in my mind, kind of similar. You're
okay,
sounds like you're going to make a motion to put retail cannabis on the ballot, subject to proper language provided by staff.
okay. But having just said that we've already approved the budget, and then and then you're going to come back with language. Do we need to include that? Because we're not going to rescind our vote to warn based on the language that you bring us, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm going too far.
Yeah, I think if it sounds like you're voting tonight to put retail cannabis on the ballot, and that you will see the ballot for final approval next week. The warning, not the ballot. Excuse me.
Okay, Don, do you get what you need to?
I think I do. Let me try it. I make the motion that we approve putting the opt-in, opt-out question of cannabis on the town meeting ballot to be, and to have this, to have the staff direct the wording of said, what do I want to say, vote? Does that make sense?
You
Greg,
missed the
okay?
word retail.
Retail, thank you. I knew there was something missing.
So Greg, okay. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, any discussion? Are we okay with the way the motion was worded? All right, we'll go with it. We all know what it means, right?
Yeah, I think we all clearly know the intent. We're just looking for the proper language, and
Yep,
happy to
okay.
have staff bring that to us next week.
All right. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, everyone. Okay, where are we now? Okay, moving on to 6H, discussion and potential action on tentative agreements about shared services between the town of Essex and the independent city of Essex Junction. We haven't yet had a discussion about those proposed agreements. We were originally going to have a discussion about the memo that came out about the agreements, but now there are actual proposed agreements. The question I have is, does the select board want to have its first discussion about these in executive session, or do you want to talk about them publicly?
I prefer to do them in executive session, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Don. Anybody else have an opinion there? I'm thinking executive session is the right place to have the first discussion as well. I see Tracy nodding her head, so at least I have consensus. I can't tell what Pat, there he goes.
Yeah, sorry.
All right,
Yes,
all right.
I'm
So
fine with it.
we'll circle back to that, providing we get there before 11. Yes, looks like might make it. Okay, next item is 6I, discussion of possible action about town meeting process and ballots. Greg, you have something there to tell us?
I do, yeah. So the motion the select board made, I think it was a couple weeks ago, to put all questions on the ballot. The intent is there. Just to do some housekeeping, there is some legislation that was signed by the governor late last week, authorizing all business to be conducted by Australian ballot, except for the question about putting all future business on Australian ballot. But so Susan McNamara Hill provided some language based on clerks in the area that the select board should vote to move all articles to Australian ballot if you do not want to hold an in-person town meeting. So that would be the recommendation for tonight, to make that motion, just to capture what you had thought out to do a couple weeks ago.
Right, so we voted to mail ballots, but in order to make sure, in order to have all questions on that ballot, we have to have this motion, pass this motion as well. So the question here, and I think our intent that we've discussed is to have, not to have an in-person town meeting this year. Does anybody disagree with that? I think did we agree with no in-person town meeting?
Right, but we were still gonna do some kind of budget presentation by Zoom.
But we do need to do an informational meeting, right? Yeah, we have to have an informational meeting. And so in order to at this point, everything that we're going to put on the ballot has to be on the ballot anyway. We don't have any like if we had chosen to put local option tax on, we would have had to do that as a floor vote had we not, if we didn't have this authorization to move it to the ballot. We don't have that questions. We don't really have anything, but in order to do things correctly by process, we need this motion. So anybody want to make the motion? We got the motion up in front of them.
I'm gonna read the language to you again, just so you hear it. The motion would
Go ahead.
the select board vote to move all articles to Australian ballot.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thanks, Don. Thank you, Tracy. Any further discussion? Oh, I didn't go to public comment on this. I see Betsy Dunn's hand up, though. Should we go to public comment? My apologies for not doing that. Betsy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you again, Andy. So I think, just off the top of my head, though, I think that this statement that the governor has made applies to places that do not do an Australian ballot already. We already
Um,
are doing an Australian ballot. And
Only
all of
for our
things
budget.
Go to Australian.
We went and looked back at the motion and the vote we made, and it only applies to the budget.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, that needs a change, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yep. All right. Any other public comment? Anything in the room, Greg?
No.
Okay. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. Let's see, next item 6K, consider appointment to Conservation and Trails Committee. I think we want to do that in executive session. So we'll move on to the next thing. And I got to remember 6L, Greg, you had an item you wanted to add, right?
I did, but we actually skipped an item. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I did, J. Oh my goodness, I skipped J. 6J, right. Discuss and assign select board outreach efforts for town meeting. So in the past, we've gone to basketball games and hockey games and other events and passed out packets of material and encouraged folks to come to town meeting. Last year, because of COVID restrictions, we did not do that. And then we're not going to, I don't think we want to do that again. I think we're going to skip that again this year. Anybody object to that?
I think we'd be
suspect
hard
not.
pressed to get into the schools to do information handouts anyway.
Right. So I guess the intent here, Greg, is to consider doing informal non-quorum gatherings.
Yeah, from our perspective or staff perspective, what you did last year, I think there were maybe 2 or 3 kind of online informal meetings, not without a quorum. That a few of the select board members attended to answer questions, ask, put information out there. We will, of course, have the informational meeting that Don referenced. The night, it'll be on February 28th. So it's typically the town meeting night. So that'll be the town-wide event with a quorum. We can put together some Q&A sheets like we've done in the past and have those up on our website and have them available if the select board chooses to do any of those informal online meetings. So I guess the big question for staff is if you want to do the informal electronic meetings again, and we can work on setting some of those up for you. Or any other ideas that you might have to get the word out about town meeting.
All right. Thanks, Greg. And since we're mailing ballots, people will have, I mean, many people won't wait until February 28th to come to the informational meeting to get their information. So this is an opportunity to answer questions for earlier voters as well. So anybody have any comments? Anybody supportive, not supportive?
Are you planning on putting the information sheets with the ballots?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Don.
What about putting the information sheets that you would normally hand out in with the ballots?
I'd have to check with Susan, the clerk. I believe you're not supposed to bring informational to the voting booth, and I don't want to.
No, not to bring it in the booth. When you mail the ballot, Greg.
Yeah, but would it be? My question would be, would it be considered similar to providing information at a voting booth? And don't want to run into any trouble about potentially swaying people which way they vote by putting that in with the ballot. But I'll be happy to ask Susan about that and see if that's a valid concern or not.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Anybody willing to do a informal session up to your schedule? You can, I would imagine we would work with Tammy to get something set up and she would help us advertise it. And would we plan on having staff support it? Would it be just select board members answering questions? Greg, is that the
last year
intent?
Basically just select board members answering questions? That's kind of the model. It was the select board going to events back when that was happening before COVID. So staff would certainly help schedule the event and set it up and provide the link, but leaving it to the select board members to do the actual posting.
As somebody
Okay.
that did 2 of them last time, I had one person come to the first one and 2 people come to the second one, so I'm not sure how effective that is, to tell you the truth.
That's good feedback.
I'm happy to make myself available for as many as possible.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it again, but I'm just saying that's what happened last
Yep.
time.
Yep. I guess it's better to offer it than not.
Yeah, maybe we should do just 1 or 2 of them and have 2 of us show up for those, make it more limited. If I seem to recall the same thing that Don experienced, I had like 3 people in the meeting that Elaine and I presented. So it was, I mean, I expect it's going to be sparse attendance regardless, but if we can get 2 meetings in, then I feel like we've done our due diligence for people to come if they need to ask questions.
All right. So Greg, sounds like the board is in general supportive of it and everybody's willing to participate. So if we can get some guidance with regard to, I guess, or, how we arrange the scheduling, and I guess you need to put together the materials and all that as well. And I assume we're talking second half of February kind of time frame. There is a school vacation week in there too, so try to get some before that. When do we know when ballots are get mailed?
I do not know off the top of my head. I'll have to check
Okay.
the clerk's office.
Yep. Okay. So that would be helpful, I guess, to understand from a
So it has
scheduling
to be- it has to
standpoint.
be, I believe, 2 weeks before the vote. I think it's 14 days before the vote, I believe.
Okay. All right. So Greg, do you need anything more from us?
Okay, Jordan here from Channel 17 is, he said it's the 9th is what he thinks. We've told him to mail the ballots.
Okay. Okay. So I think once the ballots are out, then maybe we can start having them. I didn't or wasn't able to participate in any of them last year. Did we have a presentation we went through, or is it generally just a question and answer thing?
Question and answers.
Just questions and answers. Okay. Okay.
I thought that we had done like a brief budget presentation, like only like 10 minutes, fairly quickly, just to set a table. But I realized that we may all have gone into it with slightly different.
So Greg, you and I are talking to Town Meeting TV. Is it the last?
It is.
The end of the month there, right? So we need to have a presentation together for that anyway, right?
You should have something, yeah.
Right? Or do we? I don't know.
Note that to touch base with you on a budget presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you and I need to work on that or something. Yeah. So okay. So there will be hopefully some materials available to be used in February. If folks want to use them.
If not, well, I'll need to learn the ukulele.
Right. Okay. All right. You have what you need, Greg?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
All right. And then I had already jumped to K, which is we're going to go into executive session to talk about appointments. And then L, Greg, was another executive session to talk about contracts.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. And then M, I wanted to pull out the December 20th minutes. It's a very simple fix, but on line 176, I wanted to remove the word daily. The question being answered there was how many emails did you get on a certain topic? And it said 5 or 6 daily, but it was 5 or 6 total. So just take out the daily to it makes a big difference. So that was my only change there. And then Tracy, you wanted to pull out January 3rd minutes?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to the line item. Sorry, there's just been a whole lot of, I know I have it in email. But anyway, January 3rd, I'll find it. At the topic of the local option tax, I thought it was line 274. Anyhow, Andrew Brown had mentioned that we could sort of set guidelines for local option tax on utilities. And we later found out that that was not true, that that is not possible. I understand that we can't really edit the minutes because that is something that was said. But I just wanted to point out for these minutes, but that's actually not something that we can do. Thought it was line 274. That's what I had in my notes, but I'm not seeing. Oh yeah, 274 to 276. I apologize. So there's no changes. I just wanted the opportunity to make that comment for these minutes.
Okay. All right. Any other changes to the minutes from anybody? Can someone make a motion to approve both of them as amended, or December 20th as amended and January 3rd as written? I'll make the motion to approve December 20th, 2021 minutes as amended and the January 3rd minutes as written. A second. Thanks, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. I think that closes all of the business items for now. Consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Fred.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. On to the reading file. Any board member comments?
I have one, touches a little bit on the winter operations memo, but wanted to thank all of our staff over the last couple of days, the snowstorm, the brutal wind chill, and I saw that they had moved to yellow status with all of the COVID sickness that's going around. So just wanted to make sure that our staff knows how much we appreciate them being out on the roads at all hours, clearing with the plows. It's got a big job to do and not as many people as usual to do it. So thank you, all of our public works people.
Good job.
Thanks, Pat.
Good job.
Don, are you talking to the cat or are you talking to us?
The only thing I hate about Zoom, my cat gets on the way.
Okay. Anything else? So let's see, then we have multiple executive sessions. I guess the first one, well, there's two pieces to appointing to, there's two discussions about appointments. But I guess we can talk about both of those with one set of motions, right? So does anybody have the motions in front of them for appointments?
I do. I motion the select board enter into executive session to discuss the proposed public official appointments in according with 1 VSA, section 313A3, and to include the, I guess, just deputy manager.
All right, thanks, Pat.
Second.
Thank you, Don. So this is just a single motion. There's no one out of it. Just want to make sure there's no finding.
Yep, for this one there,
Okay.
there's nothing
All right.
else written, just that.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll go to executive session for that. Then we have, what else do we have? One about contracts.
I have that one up if you want me to.
Yep. Go ahead.
I move that the select board make the specific finding that general public knowledge of contracts would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
All right, thanks, Tracy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Pat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. You get the other motion?
Yep, I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss contracts pursuant to 1 VSA, section 313A1A, to include the deputy manager.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0. So is that all of them? Because we've got two different kinds of contracts, and we all set, Greg? Do we get them all?
Are we doing 2 committee appointments
Okay.
now?
Potentially, the motion to discuss the appointment of public officials will cover both of those items, and the contract
Okay.
will cover both of the contract items.
Okay.
All right, so then I guess the question is, are we likely going to need to come back? We may, right? Yeah, okay. All right, so we may come back depending on the outcome. All right, right, exactly. So, all right. Thank you to all those who attended. If you want to stick around, we may come back to make motions to either do appointments or do address some contract question. So you feel free to, I guess, hang out in this meeting. We are going to leave and go to a separate meeting for executive session and come back before we adjourn.
I'm going to go up to my office, so I'll give me 2 or 3 minutes, and I will see you from a different location.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a short break myself. So, yep, see you in a few minutes.